Welcome back, guys, to MysteryCon. On this channel, I narrate conspiracy theories to help you sleep and relax. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe. And also, share this video with your friends and family to help them fall asleep too. Please let me know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin.
I never intended to get involved in something so dangerous. I'm a journalist, not a conspiracy theorist, and I certainly didn't expect to be the one unraveling a cover-up that could shake the foundation of everything we've been taught about space exploration. But it all started when I found those diaries. It was at an estate sale in a sleepy part of town. Old furniture, dusty boxes, nothing that screamed important. But there was something about this particular box that caught my eye. It was tucked away in the corner, buried beneath stacks of yellowed magazines and books no one had touched in years. Inside, I found a set of worn leather-bound diaries. The ink on the pages had faded, but the words were still legible. They were dated from the late 1960s to early 1970s, right during the Apollo missions. As I flipped through the pages, I realized these weren't just the ramblings of a regular person. These were the personal accounts of an astronaut. The name scribbled on the inside cover was unfamiliar to me, but the title, Apollo 17, stood out. I knew that Apollo 17 was the final mission of the moon landings, but I had never heard of this astronaut. He wasn't part of the public mission roster. The entries seemed to be written in haste, but they were also disturbingly clear, detailing things no one had ever publicly admitted. His stories didn't match up with anything I had learned in school about the Apollo missions. The astronaut, named Jack Sterling, wrote about strange encounters, about finding something alive on the moon. Ruins, he called them. Ancient, alien structures buried deep beneath the lunar surface. At first, I thought it was all just a delusion, and astronauts exaggerated stories after a long, isolating trip in space. But there was something about the way Jack wrote. It wasn't just an outlandish claim. It felt real. I remember the first time I read one of his more chilling entries. "We came here to explore, but what we found could change everything. What's buried beneath the moon isn't just rock and dust. It's something far older. And it's dangerous." I froze. I had heard nothing of this in my education, in the documentaries, or the hundreds of space books I had read over the years. This wasn't about the excitement of space exploration, it was about something else. Something far more terrifying. But that wasn't the worst part. As I kept reading, I noticed the unsettling pattern. These weren't just personal reflections of an astronaut who had seen too much. There were hints of a cover-up, vague but deliberate references to instructions from NASA, directives to keep certain discoveries under wraps. Jack Sterling had written in his final entry, "If this doesn't get out, they'll bury the truth with us." That's when I knew something bigger was at play. I started digging into the astronaut's past. There was very little on Jack Sterling. According to public records, he had vanished after the Apollo missions, his name disappearing from history as quickly as it had appeared. No one seemed to know why or how. His family, it seemed, had been told he died in a tragic accident, but there were no details. It was as though he never existed. With each diary entry, I felt myself getting closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for. But I couldn't stop. I had to know what happened. And more importantly, what was hidden on the moon. I knew that reading these diaries was only the beginning, but I had no idea where it would lead me, or what kind of danger I'd be walking into. By now, I was convinced that the discovery in Jack Sterling's journals wasn't a hallucination, and it wasn't some overblown fantasy. This wasn't just a personal account of an astronaut. It was a story of something much darker, something buried deep beneath the surface of what we'd been told about the moon landings. The first real clue that pushed me deeper into the mystery came one evening, when I was going through the final diary entry. It was like everything in the room went still. The words jumped off the page at me. They weren't there to explore the moon. They were there to secure it. I can't explain it now, but what we found, it's not just ruins. It's a warning. There's something out there, something not from this world, and we are its guardians. I had to stop reading. The words seemed to pulse in the silence around me, almost as though they were alive. I didn't know what to think. Was this the ramblings of someone who had been stuck in the harsh, unforgiving vacuum of space for too long? Or was this astronaut actually trying to warn the world about something the public had never been told? I started to dig further. I managed to track down a few former colleagues of Jack Sterling. Most of them had retired years ago, and when I reached out to them, I was met with silence, or worse, polite evasions. But there was one man, an old engineer named Frank, who was willing to meet me. He agreed to talk under the condition that we meet in a dimly lit coffee shop, away from prying eyes. Frank was in his early 70s, with a steady hand and a weathered face. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. The moment I sat down, he slid a manila folder across the table to me. "I don't know if you're ready for this," he said, his voice low and cautious. I opened the folder. Inside was a series of photos, black and white, taken from the Apollo missions. But they weren't just the standard shots of astronauts walking on the moon or planting flags. These photos were different, blurry, with strange markings in the background, images of large, metallic structures partially buried beneath lunar dust. I stared at the photos in disbelief. The shapes were too symmetrical, too unnatural. This was nothing like the barren, rocky surface we'd been shown in textbooks. Frank explained that these photos were classified, and they were the real reason behind the Apollo missions. They didn't just send astronauts to the moon to explore, or for some scientific curiosity. They went to prevent something from waking up, something ancient and dangerous. They were trying to keep it buried, hidden from the public. But what Jack found, and what he wrote about, was real. It's out there, and they've been covering it up ever since. I was stunned. My mind raced with questions. If what Jack Sterling had written in his diaries was true, if these photos weren't some elaborate hoax, then the entire space race had been a cover for something much more sinister. I felt a chill creep down my spine as the pieces started to fall into place. The government, NASA, they weren't just concerned with space exploration. They were trying to control something far more powerful, something that could change everything. I had to keep going. There was no turning back now. I asked Frank how he had come to possess these photos. He looked around nervously, then leaned in closer. "I didn't just work for NASA. I worked with the guys who wanted to keep this all under wraps. They were the ones who briefed us, who told us what was really going on. It wasn't about exploration. It was about safeguarding humanity from something we can't even begin to understand." Frank's warning stayed with me long after we parted ways. There was a shadow hanging over everything now, a sense that I was treading on dangerous ground. The deeper I dug into Jack Sterling's story, the more questions arose, and the more dangerous it became. Someone didn't want these secrets to get out, and I could feel their presence closing in on me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that I wasn't just up against a cover-up. I was up against a system, a hidden network of power that was more deeply embedded than I could have imagined. The photographs I had seen with Frank were the first real proof that the Apollo missions weren't just about science or exploration. They were about safeguarding something dangerous on the moon, something that had been there for far longer than humanity. And someone didn't want that secret out. As I dug deeper, I began to notice strange things happening around me. At first, it was subtle, late-night phone calls that didn't leave a message, strange cars parked outside my apartment, the eerie sense of being watched every time I left my house. But then it escalated. One evening, after a long day of research, I arrived home to find my apartment ransacked. My files were scattered across the floor, my laptop was gone, and there was no sign of forced entry. Whoever did this had access to my place. They knew exactly what they were looking for. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the same group Frank had warned me about, the ones who'd been trying to suppress the truth all these years. I wasn't just dealing with bureaucrats or people within NASA. I was dealing with something far more insidious. There was a hidden force, a secret society or group that had been operating in the shadows for decades, ensuring that the truth about the moon, and the threat buried beneath it, stayed hidden. It wasn't long before I found my first lead. A cryptic message appeared in my inbox, sent from an anonymous account. The message was simple. They're watching you. Be careful. The truth is buried deeper than you think. There were no other details, but the message sent chills down my spine. Whoever sent it knew exactly what I was doing. They knew I had uncovered something big. The next morning, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered it cautiously, but all I heard was heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice spoke, low, muffled, but unmistakably clear. Stop digging. If you don't, you'll regret it. I knew then that I had no choice but to keep going. I had already seen too much. The question now wasn't whether I could stop. It was whether I could survive long enough to expose the truth. I turned to my contacts, people who had worked in space research, old colleagues from my time in journalism who had connections in high places. Some of them were afraid to talk, their voices trembling when I pressed them for details. But one, an ex-scientist from NASA, agreed to meet me in secret. We met in a dimly lit diner, away from prying eyes. His name was Paul, and he had worked on early Apollo missions. He had been one of the scientists who'd been asked to keep quiet about certain anomalies found during the moon landings. He told me about the special briefings that took place behind closed doors, where the real reasons behind the missions were explained. They didn't send us there to explore, Paul said, his voice barely above a whisper. They sent us there to secure it. The moon isn't just some barren rock. There's something under the surface. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know it's ancient. It's alive. And it's dangerous. He paused, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The higher-ups know about it. They've been keeping it quiet, but there are others, people who are trying to protect it from getting out. There's a group of influential people, scientists, politicians, military figures, who are involved in this cover-up. And they won't stop until it's buried for good. I felt the weight of his words settle over me. It wasn't just NASA or the government that had been hiding this. There was a much larger force at play, one that spanned industries, institutions, and possibly even global powers. And now, it seemed, they had noticed me. I couldn't back down now. The truth was far too important. But I had to be careful. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to let me continue without a fight. They would do whatever it took to stop me. But I had made up my mind. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I had already seen enough to know that humanity's history, and its future, depended on it. The threats were only escalating. After my meeting with Paul, the warnings came fast and furious. I started receiving anonymous letters, cryptic messages on social media, and even more phone calls, each one more insistent than the last. The voices on the other end were always the same, cold, distorted, and relentless. Stop digging. You're treading on dangerous ground. The words began to haunt me. But even as the pressure mounted, I couldn't back down. I had seen the photographs. I had read the diaries. And I had spoken to people who had worked on the Apollo missions, people who knew the truth. The pieces were coming together, but there was still so much left to uncover. The real breakthrough came when I managed to get my hands on a series of declassified government documents. They were buried deep in a public archive, hidden among thousands of unimportant files. I had been sifting through them for hours when something finally caught my eye, a reference to an off-the-books mission that had been conducted after Apollo 17. This mission wasn't officially listed anywhere, but there it was, tucked away in the margin of a report on lunar exploration. I knew I had found something significant. The report mentioned Project Artemis, an operation that took place in the late 1970s. It described a covert mission to the moon after the public Apollo missions had ended. This wasn't just a regular trip to gather samples or explore further. No, this mission had a much more alarming purpose. It was about securing something on the moon, something that had been discovered during the original missions. The documents didn't go into detail, but they mentioned an alien structure, something that NASA had decided needed to be contained. I knew then that I was on the right track. The secret I was uncovering wasn't just about ruins or artifacts, it was about something much darker. The moon was being used as a containment site, a prison for something that humanity wasn't supposed to know about. But as I dug further into the archives, I encountered a strange roadblock. Every time I tried to access the files on Project Artemis, the documents would disappear from the database. I'd request them, and the system would show that the files were being processed, but then, nothing. They would vanish without a trace. It was as if someone didn't want me to find the full truth. I started to feel like I was being pushed into a corner, but I wasn't about to stop. I reached out to some of my more reliable contacts, those who still had access to classified files. After a few weeks of persuasion and threats, one of them managed to get me a copy of a secret report. This report detailed the exact purpose of the Apollo missions, as well as Project Artemis. And it wasn't just about studying the moon. What I learned in those pages shattered everything I thought I knew about the space program. According to the documents, NASA wasn't just exploring space for the sake of knowledge. They had been tasked with monitoring the moon to ensure that certain alien entities remained sealed beneath the surface. The artifacts they had found during the Apollo missions weren't just relics. They were a sign of something more dangerous. The true mission of Apollo 17, and subsequent secret missions, had been to prevent these entities from breaking free. The moon was a prison, and it wasn't just the ruins that were a threat, it was what lay dormant beneath them. The Apollo astronauts had unwittingly uncovered an alien civilization that had been there long before humanity existed. As I read through the report, I felt a growing sense of dread. I had known I was uncovering something big, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. I wasn't just dealing with a simple cover-up. I was dealing with an intergalactic secret, one that could change everything we knew about the origins of humanity and the universe. The more I found, the more I realized that there were powers, both earthly and otherworldly, that would stop at nothing to prevent the truth from coming out. And I wasn't the only one digging. I started noticing unfamiliar people following me, watching my every move. I wasn't just facing government pressure anymore. I was up against something far bigger and much more dangerous. I had to be careful. Whoever or whatever was behind this would do anything to keep the truth from reaching the public. But at this point, it didn't matter. I had come too far to turn back. The walls around me were closing in. Every step I took brought me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But it was too late to turn back now. After everything I had uncovered, the hidden files, the photos, the cryptic warnings, I knew that the secret buried on the moon wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a monumental discovery that, if revealed, could completely alter the course of human history. The breakthrough came one rainy afternoon. I had spent weeks chasing dead ends and trying to piece together fragmented pieces of evidence. But it wasn't until I received an anonymous email, this time from someone I didn't recognize, that everything started to fall into place. The email was short, but the attachment it included sent a chill through me. It was a detailed report from NASA, outlining the findings of the Apollo missions, and for the first time, the document explicitly confirmed the existence of alien ruins on the moon. But what struck me wasn't just the acknowledgement of the ruins, it was what was buried underneath them. The report revealed that the ruins were not simply artifacts or ancient remnants of an unknown civilization. They were part of a much larger and more complex structure, an alien prison. According to the document, this structure had been sealed for millennia, but the Apollo missions had inadvertently uncovered it. The artifacts found on the moon were part of a technology that could contain something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The real shocker came when I reached the last page of the document. It was a confession, of sorts, written by a high-ranking NASA official, buried deep within the report. It described the true purpose of the Apollo missions that had been sold to the public as efforts of exploration and scientific discovery, but which, in reality, were about containing a hidden extraterrestrial threat. The astronauts weren't just there to plant flags and take samples. They were sent to ensure that nothing from the moon's surface could escape and reach Earth. The document detailed a series of containment procedures that had been developed in the wake of the Apollo missions, procedures that had kept the threat sealed until now. The most chilling part was the final line of the report. The moon is not just a dead rock. It is a prison. The entities trapped there are not of this world, and they must never be allowed to return. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the discovery hitting me all at once. For decades, we had been told that the Apollo missions were about exploration, about reaching for the stars. But the truth was far darker. The moon wasn't just an unexplored frontier. It was a tomb, a prison built to keep something dangerous from escaping. And somehow, someway, it had all been covered up. The implications were staggering. If the public found out about this, everything we knew about space, science, and history would be thrown into chaos. The powers that had kept this secret hidden for so long would stop at nothing to ensure that it remained buried. I had always suspected that there was more to the moon landings than we had been told, but I never imagined anything like this. The moment I made this discovery, I knew my life had changed forever. I was no longer just a journalist chasing a story. I had stumbled upon something that could shake the foundations of everything humanity believed about its place in the universe. But I wasn't the only one aware of what I had found. The closer I got to the truth, the more danger I was in. I could feel the eyes on me, the constant surveillance, the ever-growing threat. But I couldn't stop now. Not when I had uncovered something this monumental. I had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. But first I needed to figure out just how deep this conspiracy went, and who would stop at nothing to keep it from being exposed. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep this conspiracy ran. Each new discovery seemed to push me further into the abyss, pulling me away from everything I once knew. I had uncovered the truth about the Apollo missions, the real reason they went to the moon. But now, I was faced with an even more terrifying realization. The cover-up didn't end with NASA. It extended far beyond that, and the people involved were willing to do anything to keep the truth from surfacing. After the revelation from the declassified report, I knew I couldn't stay idle. My research had revealed enough to convince me that the threat on the moon was real. But there were still so many unanswered questions. What exactly was sealed away on the moon? Who had placed it there, and why? And most pressing of all, why hadn't we been told the truth? I spent days going over every document, every piece of evidence I had gathered. But it wasn't enough. I needed something more concrete, something that would make this story undeniable. I turned to the most trusted resource I had, Frank, the old engineer from NASA. The information he had given me was invaluable, but I knew he had more. I just needed to convince him to trust me with it. I reached out to him again, asking if he knew anything about the details of Project Artemis. He hesitated before agreeing to meet. "This goes deeper than you think, Emily," he warned me. "What you're trying to uncover, it's not just about the moon anymore. It's about the future of the planet." We met in a small, secluded park on the outskirts of the city. Frank was clearly nervous. His eyes darted around as he spoke, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "They've been watching you. They know what you're doing. But it's not just the government anymore. There are people, other people, powerful people. I could sense the weight of his words. He wasn't just talking about government agencies or NASA. He was talking about something more shadowy, something that had been pulling the strings for decades. He didn't elaborate, but I didn't need him to. I knew exactly what he meant. The secrecy surrounding the Apollo missions wasn't just a case of government control. It was bigger than that. Frank handed me a folder filled with documents, old memos, confidential reports, and strange blueprints for something called Project Vigilance. The documents didn't provide many answers, but they confirmed my worst fears. There was more to the moon's secrets than just alien ruins. There was a plan, a carefully orchestrated effort to control the information about what had been discovered on the moon and prevent anyone from learning the truth. As I sifted through the documents, one report caught my eye. It was a blueprint for an underground facility, built not on Earth, but on the moon. The facility was marked as classified, and its purpose was vaguely described as monitoring and containment. The blueprint showed multiple layers of defense systems designed to prevent unauthorized access. This was no ordinary research station. It was a high-security facility meant to house something far more dangerous. I could feel my heart race as I connected the dots. The alien ruins weren't just artifacts. They were part of an ancient alien structure, one that had been sealed for a reason. And this facility was built to contain whatever had been discovered. But the question remained, why hadn't we been told? I left the meeting with Frank feeling more unsettled than ever. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but they didn't make the picture any clearer. Instead, it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one wrong move could send me tumbling into a truth I might not be ready to face. That night, I went over the documents again. There was something in the blueprints that I had missed earlier. A small note in the margin, barely visible, read, "Containment protocol initiated. Subject unknown. Level 6 security breach possible." The phrase, "Level 6 security breach," stuck with me. It was clear this was no ordinary operation. There was something far more significant at stake. The more I read, the more I realized that the truth wasn't just hidden by NASA or government agencies. There were others involved, people who had their own reasons for keeping this secret. And they were watching me. They knew I was getting closer, and I could feel the danger closing in. I wasn't just investigating a cover-up anymore. I was uncovering something far more dangerous. Something that could change the very fabric of reality. I had always known that the deeper I dug, the more dangerous this investigation would become. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that was about to unfold. It wasn't just a matter of uncovering a conspiracy anymore. It was a matter of survival. And I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. It happened one night, just a few days after my meeting with Frank. I had been following a trail of leads, tracking down people who might know more about the classified, Level 6, security breach mentioned in the blueprints. I had reached out to a former NASA employee, a man named Charles, who had worked on the Apollo missions in an engineering capacity. He was hesitant at first, but after several phone calls, he agreed to meet me at a quiet bar in a secluded part of the city. When I arrived, Charles was already there, sitting in a corner booth. He looked uneasy, constantly glancing over his shoulder, and his hands trembled slightly as he took a sip from his drink. "I've heard the rumors, Emily. You're getting too close to something that shouldn't be uncovered," he said, his voice strained. I sat down across from him, leaning in. "What's the real story behind the Apollo missions, Charles? Why was the moon considered such a dangerous place? Why is it still under lockdown?" Charles hesitated, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "I don't know if I should be telling you this. The people involved, they're not just government agents. They're higher up. These are people who control everything. They know things about the moon, about what's buried there, that go far beyond what NASA's ever told us." I could sense his fear. This wasn't just a conversation about classified missions. This was a man who was terrified of saying too much. But I pushed him further. You can't just tell me that and leave it at that. I need answers. What happened on the moon? He looked around nervously, then leaned forward, whispering. They found something. And they're keeping it contained. But the truth is, the entity on the moon isn't just a threat. It's a beacon, a signal for something much worse. If it wakes up, it could bring destruction, and not just to Earth, to the entire galaxy. Before I could ask more questions, Charles suddenly stopped talking and froze. I followed his gaze and saw a shadow moving near the door of the bar. My stomach dropped as I realized someone was watching us, someone who didn't want us talking. A tall man in a black suit had entered, and he was staring directly at our table. Charles's face went pale. We have to leave. Now. I stood up quickly, trying to keep my composure, but inside, my heart was racing. Charles grabbed my arm, his grip tight, pulling me towards the exit. As we moved through the bar, I could feel the man's eyes burning into the back of my head. I knew who he was. I'd seen him in the crowd at the archives before, the same man who had been following me. Charles and I exited the bar and quickly headed for the parking lot. But before we could reach the car, the tall man was upon us. I barely had time to react as he stepped in front of us, blocking our path. He wasn't alone. We know what you're after, Mississippi. You should stop before it's too late, the man said, his voice cold and calculated. His expression remained emotionless, like he had been trained to handle situations like this. You've already seen too much. Charles stepped forward, trying to protect me. You don't understand. This isn't about us anymore. It's about what's coming. What's been buried for decades. The man didn't say a word. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something small and shiny, a flash drive. He tossed it at me, and I instinctively caught it. Take that, he said. But know this, if you continue down this path, there will be no going back. People like you don't survive when they uncover these secrets. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. My pulse was racing as I held the flash drive in my hand. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. A warning that whoever was behind this conspiracy would stop at nothing to silence me. Charles was shaking his head, his face filled with regret. I shouldn't have brought you into this, Emily. Now they'll come after you. They'll stop at nothing to protect their secret. But it was too late for me to turn back. The truth was out there, and I couldn't ignore it. I looked down at the flash drive in my hand, knowing that it held the key to everything, the truth about the moon, about the entities buried beneath it, and about the forces that would go to any lengths to keep it hidden. Now I had no choice but to uncover what was on that drive. The more I learned, the more I realized that this wasn't just a conspiracy. It was a fight for survival. And I was in the middle of it. The flash drive weighed heavily in my hand as I made my way back to my apartment. The man in the suit had made it clear that I was stepping into dangerous territory, but I didn't care. I had come too far. The drive held information that could change everything. Everything about the moon, the Apollo missions, and the truth about the alien threat that had been kept hidden for so long. Once inside, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The files opened up immediately, revealing a mix of technical data, video recordings, and classified documents. I scanned through the folders, my heart pounding as I absorbed what was before me. It was like a treasure trove of information that had been buried for decades. But what stood out above everything else was a series of technical blueprints, diagrams of what appeared to be alien technology. The designs were unlike anything I had ever seen. They were too advanced, too intricate. There was no way this technology could have come from Earth. I studied the blueprints closely, and something strange caught my eye, an unfamiliar symbol embedded in the designs. It resembled a complex geometric pattern, almost like an intricate lock or key. The symbol was repeated across multiple documents, along with cryptic annotations that I couldn't fully decipher. I wasn't sure what it meant, but I knew it was significant. As I scrolled through the files, I came across several video recordings, dated from the early 1980s. The footage was grainy and shaky, but it was clear what was happening. In the videos, a group of scientists and military personnel were standing inside what appeared to be a heavily secured underground facility. They were gathered around a large object, a dark, metallic sphere that was suspended in midair, held by advanced technology one couldn't even begin to comprehend. One of the men in the video, wearing a lab coat, spoke directly to the camera. "This is the object we found on the moon. We've managed to secure it here for further study. We still don't fully understand its properties, but it's clear that it's not from this world. The technology embedded in it is unlike anything we've ever seen." The scientist continued, but his voice was cut off by static, and the video abruptly ended. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. It was almost too much to process. These were the very people I had been looking for, the ones behind the cover-up, the ones who had kept the truth hidden for decades. They had discovered something on the moon, something far more advanced than anything humanity had ever created. And they had brought it back to Earth, keeping it locked away in secret laboratories. The implications of this were staggering. If this technology had been hidden on the moon for millennia, if it was as advanced as it appeared, then what else had humanity been kept in the dark about? What else had been uncovered and buried? I knew I had to go deeper. The next step was to find this lab, to track down the people who had worked on this project, and who had tried to keep it a secret for so long. But I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going without putting myself in more danger. But then came the unexpected. I received another email, but this one was different. It wasn't anonymous. It was from a name I recognized, someone who had been involved in the original Apollo missions. It was Frank. "Emily," the email began, "I've been watching you. I know you've uncovered the truth about the technology we found on the moon. But you need to be careful. The people behind this, they aren't just interested in keeping the technology a secret. They'll do anything to protect it, even if it means silencing you." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Frank was telling me something I had already suspected. There were forces out there, people who had access to this alien technology, and would stop at nothing to protect it, no matter the cost. The email continued, "There's a lab in the Nevada desert, a facility that is the heart of everything. It's where the technology was first studied. If you want to know the truth, that's where you need to go. But don't trust anyone. They'll be watching." It was a dangerous lead, but it was the only one I had. The Nevada desert, home to some of the most secretive government facilities in the world, places that didn't even appear on maps. I had to go there, but I also knew it could be a one-way trip. I packed my things and left in the dead of night. I wasn't sure what awaited me in the desert, but I knew one thing for certain. The closer I got to uncovering the truth, the more danger I would be in. But I had no choice. I couldn't stop now. The world needed to know what had been hidden on the moon, and I was the only one who could expose it. The Nevada desert was more desolate than I had imagined. It stretched endlessly, an ocean of sand and rocks with little sign of life for miles. As I drove, the road became more remote, the air thicker with dust. I knew the lab Frank had mentioned wasn't just any facility. This was a place so secretive, so heavily guarded, that it didn't even exist on any map. The people who ran it would do anything to protect their secrets. And I was about to walk right into the heart of it. I had no exact coordinates for the lab. Frank had been vague on the details, urging me to trust my instincts when I got close. I drove until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. That's when I saw it, the faint outline of a building in the distance, almost hidden by the dunes. I had found it. The lab was surrounded by high fences, motion sensors, and security cameras. There were guards at every entrance, armed and alert, making it clear that this place was off limits to anyone without clearance. But I wasn't planning on walking in through the front gate. I had to find another way in. I parked my car behind a cluster of rocks and waited until nightfall. The desert air grew colder, and the sky above was dotted with stars, the only light in the otherwise pitch-black landscape. I knew I had to act quickly. The longer I stayed, the higher the chances that someone would notice me. I made my way toward the perimeter, moving silently between the shadows. The high-tech fences were equipped with motion detectors, but I had come prepared. I had done my research, and I knew how to bypass the sensors. With a small device I had picked up along the way, I disabled the security system long enough to slip through a gap in the fence. Once inside, I was careful not to make a sound. The lab was massive, a sprawling complex with multiple levels underground. The air was thick with the scent of machinery and disinfectants. It felt sterile, cold, like a place that had been built to keep secrets locked away. And I had no intention of leaving without uncovering them. I moved through the corridors, avoiding the occasional guard or security camera. The place was heavily monitored, but there was no turning back now. I was getting closer. I could feel it. My heart was racing as I reached the main elevator shaft. I had to go down to the lower levels, the levels that Frank had hinted at. The deeper I went, the more I realized how extensive the operation was. This was no ordinary research facility. It was a fortress of knowledge, a place where humanity's greatest secret had been hidden for decades. I found the access panel to the lower levels and quickly worked to override the security lock. It took a few minutes, but I was in. The elevator descended, the sound of the gears grinding sending a shiver down my spine. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into a sterile, dimly lit hallway. The walls were lined with security doors, each one locked tight, each one hiding something that had been kept from the world. I moved down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The first door I tried opened easily. Inside was a large room filled with strange equipment. In the center of the room was a display case, and in it, the most shocking sight I had ever seen, a piece of the alien technology one had only seen in blueprints and photographs. It was a dark, metallic object, unlike anything from Earth. The surface was covered with intricate symbols that matched the ones from the blueprints I had seen. This was the technology they had found on the moon. This was the key to everything. But as I moved closer, I heard a noise behind me, a faint click, then the sound of footsteps. Someone was coming. I quickly ducked behind a large metal crate, my heart racing. I knew I had to act fast. I had come too far to be caught now. I crouched low, waiting for the guard to pass, but as I peeked around the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a guard. It was a man in a black suit, the same man I had seen before, the one who had been watching me, the one who had threatened me. He was standing in front of a large control panel, entering a series of commands. I couldn't see exactly what he was doing, but I knew it wasn't good. He had to be protecting the technology, the same technology that had been kept hidden for decades. I had to make a decision. Do I confront him, try to get more information, or do I take the risk and grab the technology? But I didn't have much time. He was close to finishing whatever he was doing, and I couldn't let him stop me now. I decided to take the risk. I stepped out from my hiding place, silently moving toward the display case. As I reached for the object, I heard the man speak. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice calm and collected, as though he had been expecting me. "You're in over your head." Before I could react, I felt a sharp pressure at my back. Someone else had appeared from the shadows, and they weren't alone. I froze, the sharp pressure at my back making it clear that I was trapped. The man in the black suit, the man who had been following me, hadn't been alone. A second figure, dressed in the same manner, appeared from the shadows, their cold eyes fixed on me. This wasn't a simple encounter. I was facing a well-organized operation, one that had been tracking my every move. "You're too curious for your own good, miss," the man in front of me said, his voice calm but laced with menace. He didn't seem surprised to see me there. It was as though he had known I would make my way into this facility eventually. I felt a cold bead of sweat trickle down my spine. I was standing face to face with the people who had orchestrated the cover-up of the greatest discovery in human history. The moon wasn't just a barren rock. It was a prison, and the beings trapped there had the power to bring about destruction on a scale unimaginable to ordinary people. Yet, here I was, about to expose everything, and these men would stop at nothing to ensure that the truth stayed buried. I slowly raised my hands in a gesture of surrender, trying to buy myself some time. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rising panic in my chest. "You can't keep this secret forever. The truth will come out." The man chuckled softly, a dark smile creeping across his face. "You have no idea how much effort we've put into keeping this quiet. People like you, people who want to dig into things they don't understand, they're dangerous. You're not just exposing a simple cover-up, Emily. You're threatening the safety of the entire world." He stepped closer, and I could see the faint outline of something metallic on his wrist, a device of some sort, likely a tracking system. It made sense now. They had been tracking me all along, ensuring that I wouldn't get too close to the truth. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let everything I had uncovered be wiped away because of a few threats. The world needed to know what was hidden beneath the moon's surface. And in that moment, I realized there was only one way out, one way to make sure the truth saw the light of day. As the man continued to speak, I spotted a small panel on the wall beside me. It was a control panel, similar to the one he had been working with earlier. I didn't know what it did, but I knew that it could give me a chance. It was my only chance. I acted quickly, lunging toward the panel and slamming my hand against it. A loud beep echoed in the room as the security systems on the facility went into lockdown. The lights flickered and the doors to the laboratory slammed shut with a deafening noise. "Get her!" the man shouted, fury in his eyes. But it was too late. The lockdown had begun. I scrambled to the control console, desperately searching for anything that could help me. I needed to access the files, to get the information I had uncovered onto a secure network before they stopped me. As I typed in a series of commands, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. Spinning around, I found myself face to face with the second man, the one who had been lurking in the shadows. Without thinking, I pushed him back, causing him to stumble. He reached for something on his belt, but I was already moving. I ran toward the display case, grabbed the alien technology, and shoved it into my bag. The two men were closing in on me, but I couldn't let them stop me. I had what I needed. I had the evidence that would expose everything. All I had to do now was get out alive. The moment I reached the exit, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I glanced down to see blood seeping through my jacket. One of the men had fired a warning shot, grazing me. My vision blurred, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I pushed through the doors and ran into the night, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. The desert stretched endlessly before me, but I couldn't afford to stop. They were right behind me, and I had no idea how far they would go to make sure I didn't escape with the truth. With each step, I felt the weight of what I had uncovered, what I was carrying with me. I knew that if I survived this, if I made it out of here, the truth would finally be exposed. The world would know about the moon, about the ancient alien prison, and about the forces that had been working tirelessly to keep humanity in the dark. But I also knew that I was running out of time. The people who had tried to stop me weren't going to give up. They would follow me to the ends of the earth if they had to. The truth was out there, and I would make sure it saw the light of day. It all started on an ordinary day, or so it seemed. I, Dr. Helena Marlowe, had spent years studying ancient religious artifacts, searching for secrets hidden beneath the layers of history. My work as an archaeologist at the Vatican wasn't just about dusty old relics. It was about uncovering the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or dangerous it might be. But even I never expected to find something as dark, as hidden, as powerful as what I stumbled upon that day. I had been assigned to an excavation project beneath St. Peter's Basilica, a routine dig that promised little more than ancient stone fragments and forgotten scraps of parchment. But when my team and I were working late one evening, my fingers brushed against something strange, a cool, smooth stone that didn't belong. It didn't feel like the usual ancient bricks we'd been uncovering. I pressed harder, and to my surprise, the stone shifted slightly, revealing a hidden passage beneath the floor. My heart raced. I knew then that I was about to uncover something much bigger than any religious artifact. There was no doubt in my mind that the Vatican had secrets. The Church had hidden the truth for centuries, twisting history to fit its narrative. But this was different. This was something far more ancient, something that went beyond human understanding. I pushed aside the heavy stone and entered the narrow passage, my footsteps echoing in the silence. It felt like I was walking in the footsteps of those who had hidden something from the world, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. At the end of the passage, I discovered a small, hidden room. Inside, I found shelves upon shelves of ancient manuscripts, written in languages I could barely recognize. Some of them were sealed with strange symbols, while others were fragile, yellowed with age. The air was thick with dust, as though the room had been sealed off for centuries. But what caught my eye was the manuscript at the very center of the room. It was bound in dark leather, its edges worn with age. There was something about it that drew me in, like a force I couldn't resist. I carefully opened it, my fingers trembling. The first page was written in an archaic script I had never seen before. As I translated the symbols, my heart sank. The manuscript spoke of a hidden vault beneath the Vatican, a vault that contained knowledge so powerful, so dangerous, that the Church had kept it sealed away from the world for centuries. The manuscript described the true origins of Christianity, origins that involved not just earthly events, but beings from another world. Beings who had visited Earth long before the birth of Christ, guiding humanity and influencing the course of history. The implications were staggering. If the contents of this vault were to be revealed, it would shake the very foundation of modern religion. I couldn't believe it. The Church had known the truth all along. For centuries they had suppressed it, kept it hidden, manipulated history to maintain their power. And now, I had uncovered it. The knowledge was right there, within my reach. But just as quickly as the excitement built up, a cold chill ran down my spine. I wasn't alone. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. Someone, or something, was watching me. That's when I realized I wasn't just uncovering the past. I was about to become part of a much larger conspiracy, one that involved not only the Vatican but forces beyond human comprehension. Forces that would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. It felt like the walls were closing in as I left the hidden room beneath the Vatican. I had barely managed to escape the sight of those watching eyes. I knew the custodians were after me now, those shadowy figures who had sworn to protect the Vatican's darkest secrets. They wouldn't let me walk out of there with the manuscript without a fight. But despite the growing sense of danger, I couldn't stop myself. The manuscript had revealed too much, and now I was hooked. I rushed back to my apartment, heart pounding, every shadow in the alleyways feeling like a potential threat. The manuscript had only scratched the surface, and I was determined to uncover more. What was the vault really hiding? And why had the Church gone to such lengths to keep it secret? The first clue came to me unexpectedly. I hadn't been able to decipher much from the manuscript. It was written in a script that seemed almost alien, the symbols too complex for my knowledge. But when I tried to translate them, a name kept appearing, over and over. The elders of the vault. It sounded like some ancient order, shrouded in secrecy, guarding knowledge beyond human understanding. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the name was the key. It wasn't just some figure of speech, it had to be real. There was a group, someone, who had kept this secret for centuries. The next day, I went to the library in the Vatican, determined to find more information. I searched through their archives, hoping to find anything that would explain what the manuscript was talking about. As I dug deeper, I found something unexpected, an old, crumbling book, buried beneath a pile of much newer texts. The book was clearly centuries old, the leather cover worn and cracked. As I opened it, I found detailed notes about the Elders of the Vault, a group said to have been formed in the early days of Christianity, tasked with safeguarding knowledge that was too dangerous for the world to know. The book mentioned that the vault was hidden beneath the Vatican itself, deep in the catacombs, where no one could reach it. I felt a chill run down my spine. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply this conspiracy ran. This wasn't just a historical cover-up. It was something that had affected the Church's very foundation, something that had kept humanity in the dark for centuries. The vault wasn't just filled with ancient manuscripts, it contained evidence that would shake the very pillars of organized religion. As I sat there, staring at the faded pages, a shadow fell across the library table. I looked up quickly, but there was no one there. Only the faintest trace of a figure disappearing down a dark hallway. My heart raced. I wasn't alone. Someone had been watching me, and it was no coincidence. The custodians knew I was getting closer to the truth. They would stop at nothing to protect the secrets of the vault. I had to move fast. But how could I continue digging without attracting their attention? How far would I have to go to uncover the full story? And more importantly, would I survive long enough to reveal it? With a sense of urgency growing inside me, I left the library and made my way to the nearest exit. As I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face, but it did little to calm my nerves. The custodians were out there, and they were closing in. But the truth was, I was too far gone now. There was no turning back. The next few days felt like a blur. I kept my movements minimal, avoiding my usual haunts in the Vatican, where I knew I could be watched. Every noise seemed amplified. Every passing shadow felt like an omen. I was no longer just an archaeologist searching for history. I had become part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. The more I uncovered about the vault, the more questions arose. I knew the Church had hidden things before, religious texts, artifacts, even entire sections of history, but this was different. The vault contained knowledge of extraterrestrial origins, a truth that, if revealed, would change everything. But who was behind the protection of this secret? Who were these elders of the vault? And why had they been guarding this knowledge for so long? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. One evening, as I sat in my cramped apartment, working through the rest of the book I had found in the Vatican Library, I received a call from an untraceable number. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized the voice on the other end. "Helena," it said. The voice was low, clipped, and almost too calm. "We know what you're looking for. And you're in over your head." I didn't say anything at first, my mouth dry, as I tried to piece together who this was. The voice continued, unaffected by the silence. "The custodians have been watching you. They know about your discovery. If you think you can simply expose the truth, think again. The vault is not something to be uncovered. It was never meant for the world to know." I could barely breathe as I listened. It was a warning, one I had no choice but to heed. But why contact me now? Why give me this information? The voice wasn't done. "You need to understand, Helena. The custodians are not just protecting the vault. They are protecting humanity from itself. The knowledge inside that vault is too dangerous. If it were revealed, it would destroy the very fabric of our existence. The truth about extraterrestrial influence, About the origins of Christianity. It's not something the world is ready for. It's not something we can control anymore. The call ended abruptly, leaving me with nothing but an overwhelming sense of dread. The custodians were real. This wasn't just some shadowy group I had read about in dusty old manuscripts. They were actively watching me, manipulating events, ensuring that the vault's secrets stayed buried. But who was this person on the other end of the phone? Why did they seem to know so much? Were they trying to warn me or manipulate me into abandoning my search? My thoughts raced. I wasn't just dealing with religious authorities anymore. I was up against something far more insidious, something that had existed for centuries, protecting a truth that could unravel everything we thought we knew about history, religion, and even humanity itself. The fear was beginning to sink in. The custodians had not only infiltrated the Vatican, they were embedded in every facet of the institution, controlling the flow of knowledge, shaping history as they saw fit. They were a hidden force, one that had influenced the course of Christianity for over 1,000 years. And now, they knew I was on their trail. I had no choice but to continue. The truth was out there, waiting to be discovered. But how far would I have to go? How much would I risk? And more importantly, who could I trust? I couldn't shake the feeling that my every move was being monitored. Every step I took was being watched. But I was determined. The truth had to come out. I just had to find a way to expose it before the custodians silenced me for good. The silence of my apartment had never felt so suffocating. The walls seemed to close in with every passing hour, and my mind raced with the consequences of everything I had uncovered so far. I knew the risks, but I also knew that I couldn't stop now. The truth was too important. Over the next few days, I dug deeper into the records I had stolen from the Vatican archives, scrutinizing every detail of the manuscript I had found. I needed to understand what the custodians were protecting, and more importantly, why. The deeper I got, the more I realized this wasn't just about hidden knowledge, it was about control. Whoever controlled the truth about humanity's origins controlled the very foundation of power itself. And the Vatican, it seemed, had been in on this secret for centuries. I started to piece together more from the ancient texts. They spoke of visitors from the stars, beings who came to Earth long before the birth of Christ, sharing knowledge and technologies that shaped humanity's development. The manuscripts suggested that these visitors were not gods, but something far more advanced. Their influence felt in every major religious movement, particularly Christianity. I found descriptions of celestial beings guiding the early Christians, helping shape their beliefs, their doctrines. But the Church had erased these connections, manipulating the narrative to fit their own needs. I couldn't stop thinking about what the voice on the phone had said. The knowledge inside the vault is too dangerous. But what did they mean by that? What exactly was in the vault, beyond the manuscripts? Were these extraterrestrials truly the key to understanding human history? And if they were, what could this knowledge do to the modern world? I knew I couldn't just keep digging within the Vatican's walls. The custodians were far too powerful, and I had already uncovered far more than I should have. I had to find other sources, more information, something that could corroborate what I had discovered, something that could prove the Church had been hiding the truth all along. One night, I received an encrypted email. It was from a contact I didn't recognize, but the subject line caught my eye. "You're not the only one searching." The email contained a series of coordinates, locations across Europe, places of historical significance, where ancient knowledge had been hidden. These places, the message suggested, were linked to the celestial visitors described in the manuscripts. My heart skipped a beat. Was this a trap? Or was it a lifeline, a chance to uncover more about the vault before the custodians found me? I knew I had to go. But before I could make any decisions, I had to understand who this contact was. I spent hours researching, using every tool at my disposal, but all traces of the sender seemed to lead to dead ends. No social media accounts, no affiliations with known organizations. Whoever this was, they were either incredibly cautious or had the resources to completely cover their tracks. But as I reviewed the email again, one thing stood out. The coordinates didn't just point to random locations, they aligned perfectly with the ancient sites mentioned in the manuscripts I had found. This was no coincidence. Whoever had sent the message was on the same path I was, one that led straight to the vault beneath the Vatican. I had no choice but to follow the trail. As I packed my things, a feeling of dread settled over me. I had already lost any sense of privacy. I had become a hunted woman, watched by forces beyond my comprehension. But I couldn't let fear stop me now. The truth was just beyond my reach, and no matter the danger, I had to uncover it. The journey ahead was uncertain, and I knew it would be dangerous. The custodians were already aware of my existence. But I had no other choice. I had to expose the truth. I had to find the vault. The journey to uncover the truth had begun, and yet with each step I took, the weight of what I was about to uncover pressed harder against my chest. The coordinates I had received in the mysterious email led me across Europe, to ancient ruins and long-forgotten libraries. At each stop, I found more and more fragments that seemed to fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Ancient texts, cryptic symbols, strange artifacts, all of it connected to the celestial visitors and their influence on the origins of Christianity. The first major breakthrough came in a dusty library in a small town in southern France, buried deep in the countryside. I had never heard of it before, but it was listed as one of the coordinates from the email. Inside the library's restricted section, I uncovered a journal, its pages old and yellowed with age. It had been written by a monk in the 12th century, long before the Vatican had solidified its dominance over religious thought. The monk had written about an ancient encounter, a meeting between the early Christian church and a group of celestial beings. These beings, whom the monk referred to as the Watchers, were described as beings of light, with knowledge far beyond anything humanity had ever known. The monk had even detailed how these beings had shared advanced technologies and spiritual wisdom, including methods of healing, energy manipulation, and the knowledge of life beyond Earth. The text made it clear. The Church had been in direct contact with extraterrestrial beings who had helped shape Christianity from its very inception. It was a moment of awe, of disbelief. I held the journal in my hands, feeling the weight of history pressing down on me. This was the confirmation I had been searching for. The Church's secret wasn't just about hidden manuscripts. It was about the very foundation of humanity's religious beliefs. The celestial visitors weren't just part of the past. They were part of Christianity's creation. But just as I was absorbing the magnitude of this discovery, the phone rang. It was the same voice, calm but now laced with urgency. "Helena, you've uncovered more than you know. What you found is only the beginning. You're getting too close to the vault. The custodians will stop at nothing to silence you. You need to leave, now." My pulse quickened, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't just uncovering lost history anymore. I was digging into a truth that had been hidden for centuries, truth that was more dangerous than I could imagine. I had hoped that revealing the manuscript would bring clarity, but it only brought more questions. How had the custodians managed to keep such a monumental secret for so long? What other truths were hidden in the vault? I could hear the urgency in the voice on the other end of the phone, but I couldn't stop now. I wasn't just some archaeologist anymore. I was part of something much larger. The knowledge in that journal proved what I had suspected all along. The Church had known about extraterrestrial contact. They had suppressed it, buried it beneath layers of tradition and dogma. But why? What was the true reason for the cover-up? As the voice on the phone continued to warn me, I felt my determination harden. There was no turning back. The truth was right in front of me, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially the custodians, stop me from exposing it. I closed the journal and slipped it into my bag. The library felt like a tomb now, as though it was closing in on me. The air was thick with the weight of what I had just learned. But I had no choice. I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close. The custodians were coming for me. They knew what I had found, and they would do anything to keep me from exposing it. But I had to press on. The vault was out there, and the truth, everything, was locked inside. I would find it, no matter the cost. The road I had chosen was becoming more treacherous with every passing day. I felt the weight of my discoveries pressing on me, not just physically, but emotionally. Every step forward seemed to take me deeper into a labyrinth of secrets, with no way of knowing who could be trusted or who might be working against me. I had learned the hard way that I couldn't take anything at face value anymore. And it wasn't just strangers or shadowy figures who posed a threat, it was the people I thought I could rely on. It was a rainy evening when it happened. I had just arrived in Munich, where the next clue would lead me closer to the vault. I met up with Dr. James Carter, a colleague and a fellow researcher who had helped me decipher some of the more complex manuscripts back at the Vatican. He was an expert in ancient Christian texts and had always been my confidant throughout this journey. Or so I thought. I had been working tirelessly, piecing together ancient symbols and texts, trying to understand the significance of the celestial visitors. The clues were leading me toward a location, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I found the vault. The excitement was building in me, the truth was within reach, and I wasn't about to let anything or anyone get in my way. But as I sat down with James at a small cafe to discuss our next move, something was off. He was unusually quiet, his face pale, and there was an air of discomfort that I couldn't ignore. His fingers fidgeted with the coffee cup in front of him, and his eyes kept darting toward the door, as though he was expecting someone. I tried to shake off the unease that was gnawing at me, but my instincts were screaming. "Helena," he said finally, his voice tense. "You have to stop. This isn't what you think it is. What you're looking for, it's too dangerous. You don't know what you're getting into." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about, James? We've been in this together from the start. We've uncovered the truth. The Church has been hiding extraterrestrial contact from the world for centuries. This is our chance to expose it." He shook his head slowly, his eyes avoiding mine. "You don't understand. There's more to this than you think. The custodians aren't just some secret society. They're protecting humanity from something far worse than you can imagine. If you go any further, you'll destroy everything. The world isn't ready for this knowledge, and neither are you." I felt a chill run through me. James wasn't just worried about me, he was scared. But why? Why would he, of all people, be afraid of exposing the truth? My heart began to race as the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. "James," I said slowly, my voice trembling, "what are you not telling me?" He hesitated, looking torn. Finally, he spoke, his words heavy with regret. "I didn't have a choice. They came to me, the custodians. They told me what would happen if I didn't stop you. They promised me protection. They threatened my family. I had no choice but to betray you, Helena. I didn't want to. But if you keep going, they'll kill you. They'll kill everyone who knows the truth." I couldn't believe it. My own friend, my closest ally, had turned on me. Betrayed me. The man I thought I could trust had sided with the very forces I was trying to expose. Anger surged through me, but it was quickly replaced by a deep, bone-chilling fear. If the custodians had already gotten to James, how long did I have before they came for me? How many other people had they already corrupted? I pushed the thoughts aside, forcing myself to focus. I wasn't going to let this betrayal stop me. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. But as I stood up to leave, James grabbed my arm, his grip tight and pleading. "Helena, please. For your own sake, stop now. You're walking into something you can't possibly understand. The custodians have been controlling everything for centuries. They won't stop until you're silenced." I pulled my arm away, a cold determination settling in. You're wrong, James. I can't stop now. I've already seen the truth, and I will expose it. His face crumpled in despair, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Then you're a fool. I left the cafe with a heavy heart, but my resolve was unshaken. James had betrayed me, but that didn't change the fact that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. The custodians could try to stop me, but they wouldn't succeed. Not if I could help it. I had lost a friend, but I hadn't lost my purpose. The vault was waiting, and I would find it, no matter what it took. The betrayal still stung. I couldn't get James's words out of my head, his pleading voice, his warnings. I had lost a friend and gained an enemy. But I couldn't afford to focus on that. The truth was still out there, buried beneath layers of secrecy and danger, and I had a job to do. The custodians were closing in, but they weren't going to stop me. I was closer than ever to uncovering the full story. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I kept moving, following the trail of ancient texts and hidden manuscripts that had been passed down for centuries. Every new discovery led me closer to the vault. Each piece of the puzzle clicked into place, revealing more about the extraterrestrial origins of Christianity and the true purpose of the custodians. But I knew I couldn't do it alone anymore. The stakes had become too high. One night, as I sat in a small hotel room in Geneva, surrounded by maps, books, and notes, I received an encrypted message from the same mysterious contact who had warned me earlier. This time, the message was clearer. The vault is closer than you think, but you need the final manuscript. It's hidden in the archives of the Vatican. You'll find it in the restricted section. Don't trust anyone. The custodians are everywhere. My heart pounded. I had already been to the Vatican 100 times, but the restricted section was off limits, protected by layers of security, both physical and digital. But the manuscript was the last key I needed. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Without it, the vault's true purpose would remain a mystery. I spent the next few days preparing. The custodians were after me, and I had no doubt they were monitoring every move I made. I couldn't risk alerting them to my plan. I couldn't afford to fail. The night I infiltrated the Vatican was the most dangerous of my life. I slipped past the guards, using my knowledge of the church's layout to avoid the security cameras. My heart raced with every step. I was getting closer to the vault, the heart of the conspiracy that had been hidden for so long. The manuscript I was looking for would unlock the final truth. It would tell me everything I needed to know. As I reached the restricted section of the archives, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The door was locked, of course, but I had anticipated that. I had a set of stolen keys I'd taken from a contact within the Vatican's lower ranks. It wasn't easy, but I had pulled it off. Now I stood in front of the door, my fingers trembling as I slid the key into the lock. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust. I didn't have much time. The manuscript I needed was somewhere in this room, buried beneath centuries of forgotten knowledge. I quickly moved past rows of ancient texts and scrolls, scanning the shelves for any sign of the manuscript. And then I saw it. There, tucked away in a corner, was a small, leather-bound book. It was ancient, its edges worn, its pages yellowed with age. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me as I picked it up. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. As I opened the book, I immediately recognized the script. It was the same as the other manuscripts I had uncovered, an ancient language that described the celestial visitors. But this book was different. It wasn't just about the visitors, it was about their purpose, their mission on Earth. The manuscript described how the extraterrestrials had not only guided humanity's religious development, but had also left behind a map that led to the vault beneath the Vatican. The vault was more than just a collection of manuscripts. It was a reservoir of knowledge, a treasure trove of ancient technologies, secrets that could change the course of human history. The celestial visitors had entrusted this knowledge to the church, but the custodians had kept it hidden, afraid of what would happen if the world discovered the truth. I felt a surge of triumph. I had found it, the final piece. But even as I reveled in my discovery, I knew that I wasn't safe. The custodians would stop at nothing to keep me from exposing the truth. I was in their territory now, and they knew I had the manuscript. They would be coming for me. With the manuscript in hand, I knew there was no turning back. The truth was finally within my grasp. But at what cost? I left the archives as quickly as I could, my heart racing. I knew the custodians were already on my tail, and time was running out. But I couldn't stop now. I had the final piece of the puzzle. The vault secrets were about to be exposed, and nothing could stop me from revealing the truth. The weight of the manuscript in my bag felt heavier with every step I took away from the Vatican. I had what I came for, the final piece of the puzzle. But as I made my way through the dimly lit corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the eerie silence or the shadows creeping around every corner. No, this was different. I could feel eyes on me. The custodians were closing in. I had no doubt they knew I was on their turf now. My heart raced as I quickened my pace. Every few steps, I glanced over my shoulder, expecting someone to jump out from behind the columns or emerge from the labyrinth of hallways. The tension was unbearable, but I forced myself to focus. I had no time for fear. Not now. Not when I was so close to the truth. I had barely made it out of the Vatican's archives when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I froze. My pulse skyrocketed, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. I had been trained to stay calm in situations like this, but the reality of being hunted by a secret society bent on protecting centuries-old secrets made it hard to think clearly. I quickly ducked into a narrow passageway, pressing myself against the cold stone walls. The footsteps grew louder, and I held my breath, praying that they wouldn't find me. The shadow of a figure passed by, just inches from where I stood. I dared not move, too afraid that the slightest sound would give me away. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded. I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding and slipped back into the main corridor. I had to move faster. I couldn't let them catch me now. The manuscript was too important. It had to be exposed to the world. But as I turned the corner, I collided with a man, an older figure with a stern face and eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. He was dressed in black, his clothes blending seamlessly with the shadows. I recoiled instinctively, my mind racing to figure out what to do next. "Dr. Marlowe," he said, his voice low and calm. "I've been expecting you." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just any man. This was one of the custodians. I could see it in the cold, calculating way he looked at me. He knew exactly who I was, what I had uncovered. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain composed. The custodian smiled, a cold, unsettling smile. "It's our job to find those who seek the truth. We've been watching you, Dr. Marlowe. You're not as discreet as you think. Your movements, your inquiries, they haven't gone unnoticed." I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. The moment I realized that there was no way out. "Why?" I demanded. "Why keep the truth hidden? What's in the vault that's so dangerous?" The custodian's expression hardened, and he took a step closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "What's in the vault is not just knowledge. It's power. The knowledge you seek would change the course of human history. The truth you want to reveal is not something humanity is ready for. It could destroy everything." I stood my ground, refusing to let fear take over. "You've been lying to the world for centuries. You've kept humanity in the dark. You can't hide the truth forever. The custodian's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. You don't understand, Dr. Marlowe. We've protected the world from itself. The truth is not something anyone can control. Once it's out, there's no going back. With a swift movement, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, a sleek, black gadget that looked like a phone, but much more advanced. He pressed a button, and a low hum filled the air, followed by a flash of light. I knew what he was doing. He was calling for backup. And in that moment, I knew my time was running out. I turned on my heel and sprinted down the corridor, my breath coming in sharp gasps as I fled the Vatican. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. The custodians would stop at nothing to prevent me from exposing the truth. I burst out of the side entrance and into the quiet streets of Rome, but my heart didn't slow. I was on the run, hunted by the very forces I had sought to uncover. But I had the manuscript. I had the truth. And no matter how hard they tried to stop me, I would expose it. The world had to know. The streets of Rome blurred behind me as I sprinted into the night. My lungs burned, but my resolve was stronger than the pain. I could feel the manuscript pressing against my side, its weight both reassuring and terrifying. The truth was finally within my grasp, but I had never felt more vulnerable. The custodians were coming for me, and they had no intention of letting me leave the Vatican alive. I ducked into a narrow alley, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls as I tried to collect my thoughts. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed myself against the cool stone of the alleyway, listening for the faint sound of pursuit. My mind raced. I had to think, to find a way to get the manuscript out of my hands and into the right ones, into the world's hands. I couldn't let the custodians succeed in silencing me. But they wouldn't stop. I had seen the cold determination in the custodians' eyes. They had kept the world in the dark for too long, and they wouldn't let a single archaeologist uncover the secrets they had spent centuries protecting. They were everywhere, and they were always watching. I glanced around, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The streets felt empty, but I knew better than to trust the silence. The city had become a labyrinth, every corner a potential danger, and I was trapped in it. I needed to get to my safe house, a small apartment I had rented in the heart of the city. It was the only place I could lay low, regroup, and plan my next move. I had to stay one step ahead of the custodians. They couldn't catch me. Not when I was so close to the truth. But as I turned the corner, a familiar figure stepped into my path. I froze. James. He was standing there, his face drawn and weary, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and regret. I hadn't seen him since he betrayed me, and yet here he was, standing in front of me, blocking my way. "Helena," he said softly, "you have to stop. Please, just stop. This is bigger than you. You don't understand the consequences of what you're doing." I shook my head, my breath catching in my throat. "You betrayed me, James. You chose them over me. You chose to protect the lies. I can't trust you anymore." He flinched at my words, his face crumpling in sorrow. "I never wanted to hurt you, Helena. I never wanted any of this. But you don't know what's at stake. The custodians, they're not just protecting the church. They're protecting the world. If you expose the truth, it will destroy everything. Humanity isn't ready for it. It will tear apart everything we've built." His words were like a punch to the gut. For a moment I faltered, doubt creeping into my mind. Was I making a mistake? Was I really ready to expose something that could shake the foundations of society itself? But then I looked at the manuscript in my hand. I thought about the millions of people who had lived and died without ever knowing the truth. About the celestial visitors who had shaped human history, their knowledge kept hidden for centuries. The truth was out there. I couldn't let fear stop me from revealing it. "No," I said, my voice steady but firm. You're wrong, James. The truth has to come out. The world deserves to know. The people deserve to know. Tears welled up in his eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I had once trusted. But it was gone as quickly as it came. He took a step forward, his hands outstretched. You're not safe, Helena. The custodians, they won't stop until they have you. You have to let it go. For your own safety. I took a step back, shaking my head. I can't. I've come too far. I know what's at stake. And I'm not stopping now. James's face hardened, his expression shifting from one of sorrow to something more dangerous. Then you leave me no choice. Before I could react, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, another one of those sleek black gadgets. In an instant, the device emitted a bright flash, blinding me for a moment. I staggered back, my vision blurry. When the light faded, James was gone. I was alone again, but the truth was still in my hands. The manuscript. The final piece of the puzzle. The key to everything. I had to keep moving. I had to get to the world before the custodians did. The city of Rome had never felt more alive, or more suffocating. I could hear the hum of traffic in the distance, the voices of people going about their day, blissfully unaware of the monumental secret that had just been uncovered beneath their very feet. It was all so normal, so calm, and yet I knew that in the shadows, a storm was brewing. The custodians would stop at nothing to silence me, to keep the vault's secrets locked away forever. I had made my way to a safe location, a small, nondescript cafe that I had used as a meeting point in the past. It was the only place I felt I could gather my thoughts, without risking too much attention. But I knew that safety was temporary. The custodians were already tracking me. I could feel their presence closing in, like a storm on the horizon. I couldn't keep running forever. The truth was out, and there was only one thing left to do: confront them head-on. I sat at the back of the cafe, the manuscript hidden beneath the table, my hands trembling. I had no illusions about the risks I was taking. If I exposed the truth, the entire world would change, but so would I. I would be hunted. I would become a symbol, a martyr for a cause that most people wouldn't even understand. But I couldn't back down now. The world needed to know what the Vatican had been hiding. And then they came. The door to the cafe opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped inside. His cold, calculating gaze scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on me, he nodded subtly to the others who had followed him in. The custodians. They had found me. There were 4 of them, all dressed in black, their faces hidden beneath hoods or sunglasses. They moved toward me with a calm, measured precision, their every step deliberate. I knew who they were. I had read about them, studied their movements. But now, facing them, it felt surreal. They were real. They were here to stop me. The leader of the group, a tall figure with an unmistakably cold demeanor, stepped forward and took a seat across from me. He didn't say anything at first, simply watching me with those piercing eyes. I could see the history in them, the years of secrets they had protected. They were guardians of the lies, the keepers of a truth that was too dangerous for the world to know. "You've made a grave mistake, Dr. Marlowe," he said, his voice low and measured. "You've uncovered something that should have remained buried forever." I met his gaze, refusing to let fear show. "You've kept the world in the dark for long enough. The truth is out now, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." The custodian's lips curled into a thin smile. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The vault is not just a collection of knowledge, it's a weapon. A force that could destroy everything humanity has built. You think exposing it will bring enlightenment, but it will only lead to chaos." I leaned forward, the manuscript clenched tightly in my hands. "You've been lying to the world for centuries. This is about control. It's about keeping humanity in the dark, preventing the world from knowing what really happened, the truth about the extraterrestrial origins of Christianity. This isn't just about power. It's about protecting humanity from the truth that it's not ready to hear. The custodian's expression darkened. You think the truth is a cure? A cure for what, Dr. Marlowe? The world is not prepared for this. The chaos that would ensue, the wars, the collapse of everything we know. People would lose their faith, their beliefs, society would crumble. That is why we have kept the vault's secrets hidden. The knowledge inside it is too dangerous to be unleashed. I felt a surge of frustration. You're not protecting humanity. You're controlling it. You're afraid of losing the power you've held for centuries. The truth is freedom. The truth will give people the power to choose, to believe what they want, not what you tell them to believe. The custodian stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This conversation is over, Dr. Marlowe. You've seen too much. You've gone too far. And now you will pay the price for your mistakes. Before I could react, the others stood in unison, closing in around me. I could feel the tension in the room, the suffocating pressure of everything I had uncovered, everything I had fought for. This was it. This was the moment where the truth either got exposed or stayed buried forever. But just as they reached for me, I did the one thing I knew could change everything. I stood up and slammed the manuscript onto the table in front of them. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice steady. The world will know. You can kill me, but you cannot stop the truth from getting out. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the custodian leader slowly nodded, a strange expression crossing his face. You're a fool, Dr. Marlowe. But perhaps there is something to your conviction. You may not survive this, but your truth will be your legacy. He gestured to the others, signaling them to step back. It was as though he had decided to let me live, for now. But I knew this wasn't over. The custodians had their own agenda, and they would never stop trying to erase the truth. I had exposed the vault's secret. I had revealed its existence. But now, I had to find a way to ensure the world would hear the truth, before it was too late. It was supposed to be another quiet day in the newsroom, just another mundane assignment. I, Maya Walker, was used to the routine. My team and I worked tirelessly on independent investigations, chasing leads that, more often than not, led to dead ends. But today, something felt different. There was an itch in the air, a strange undercurrent of unease that I couldn't shake off. It all started when one of our sources, a journalist we had worked with in the past, tipped us off about a government-funded project. It was called Project Silence. The name itself raised more questions than answers, but at the time, I thought it was just another conspiracy theory, something too big, too unbelievable to be real. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. At first, the project seemed innocent enough. A research initiative funded by the government, focused on improving global communication systems. That's what the public-facing documents said. But there was something about the lack of transparency that set off alarm bells. The more we dug into it, the more questions we had. Why had they spent so much money on a communication project that didn't seem to have any concrete results? And why were so many people involved being quietly shuffled out of the picture? It didn't add up. As a journalist, I know when something smells off, and this project had a stench I couldn't ignore. My team and I were seasoned in uncovering corruption, but this was different. We began by tracking down the source who had originally reached out to us. A former government employee who had been part of the project. He was paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, always whispering in hushed tones. But he did tell us one thing that stuck. It's not just about communication, it's about control. Control? That was the first time we had heard anything that might point to something sinister. I didn't know what to make of it at first. My gut told me it was a red flag, but I couldn't connect the dots. So, we did what we do best, we dug deeper. We started collecting public records, piecing together a timeline of the project's funding and its true objectives. Each day, it felt like we were getting closer to something bigger, something far more dangerous than we could have imagined. The more we uncovered, the more it became clear that this was no ordinary project. The whispers about control were starting to make sense, but we weren't sure what the control actually entailed. Was it just a way to influence world leaders? Was it a method to sway public opinion? We had no idea yet, but I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. This was no longer just a journalistic investigation, it was becoming personal. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. The project was bigger than just a few corrupt individuals. It was an operation that could change the world as we knew it. And the deeper we dug, the more we realized that there were forces out there, powerful forces, that would stop at nothing to keep this project hidden. But we weren't going to back down. Not now, not ever. We had to find the truth. The stakes were too high. But what I didn't realize at that moment was that we weren't just investigating a government project, we were becoming part of it. And Project Silence would do whatever it took to keep its secrets buried. It would manipulate, intimidate, and destroy anyone who stood in its way. The first thread had been pulled, and I knew there was no turning back. Whatever we were about to uncover, it was going to change everything. The air felt different that day. As we sat in our office, looking over the notes from our last few interviews, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The investigation into Project Silence was starting to take on a life of its own, and it was no longer just about uncovering government corruption. There was something bigger at play, something that felt like it could shake the very foundation of society. But I didn't know what yet. Then, everything changed when we got a call from an unexpected source. Tom Harris, a former employee of the government agency responsible for Project Silence. Tom had been a part of the project until a few months ago, when he mysteriously disappeared from the public eye. The rumors had been circulating for weeks that he was either silenced or compromised, but no one knew for sure. When I saw his name flash up on the phone screen, I wasn't sure what to expect. But Tom didn't want to remain silent anymore. He had something to say, and he was ready to talk. We met him at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, somewhere away from prying eyes. Tom's appearance was unsettling. He looked worn out, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling as he took a sip of his coffee. The man I once knew as confident and self-assured now looked like a ghost of himself. His voice was low, as though he feared anyone within earshot might be listening. And in a way, I think he knew they were. "I've been followed for weeks," he confessed, glancing over his shoulder nervously. "They've got eyes everywhere. I'm not safe. No one is." My heart pounded in my chest. We had heard rumors that Project Silence had a way of keeping track of its people, but I never imagined it would be this invasive. Tom hesitated, then leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. "It's not just about communication, Maya. It's about controlling thought. They've been testing an experimental signal, one that can manipulate people's actions, thoughts, and behaviors without them even knowing it." I froze. My mind was racing as I tried to process his words. A signal that could control thoughts? It sounded like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But Tom's face was etched with fear. He was serious. And that made me nervous. If this was real, it wasn't just a project, it was a global weapon. "What do you mean by controlling thoughts?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "They've been using the media, television, radio, social media, to broadcast a signal that can influence people's actions. At first, it was small stuff, getting people to think a certain way about a news story or a politician. But now they've perfected it. They're about to go global with it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just some research project gone wrong. It was a plan to reshape society itself, one manipulated thought at a time. The implications were terrifying. But what was even more troubling was the fact that Tom had been a part of this project, and now he was on the run. He said it was only a matter of time before they came for him. The very people who had manipulated his thoughts now considered him expendable. Tom gave us a file, a small flash drive that contained encrypted documents, but he was hesitant. "You need to be careful. There are people, powerful people, who will stop at nothing to keep this hidden. You won't be able to trust anyone." I looked at the flash drive, then back at Tom. His face was pale, and he was shaking. He didn't look like someone trying to protect a secret for personal gain. He looked like someone desperate to expose the truth before it was too late. That was the moment I knew we were in over our heads. But we had come too far to turn back now. We left the cafe in a hurry, knowing we had to analyze the data, but with the sinking feeling that the moment we did, we'd be marked as targets. The stakes had just become much higher. The question was no longer just about exposing corruption. It was about stopping something that could destroy the very fabric of free will itself. As we drove back to the office, the weight of what Tom had revealed began to sink in. Project Silence wasn't just a cover-up. It was a global manipulation tool, and now we were on the front lines of a fight to stop it. The truth was out there, but finding it, and surviving the process, was going to take everything we had. The days after our meeting with Tom were a blur. The weight of what we had learned settled heavily on my shoulders, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, shadows lurking at the corners of my vision. Every phone call, every email, every conversation seemed to be under scrutiny. But even worse was the growing realization that the forces behind Project Silence weren't just interested in hiding the truth. They were willing to do anything to keep it buried. And they would stop at nothing to keep their grip on the world. It wasn't long before we began to uncover just how deep this went. Tom had given us access to documents that were so highly classified, they were virtually untouchable. But with a little digging, and a lot of help from some hacker friends, we managed to crack the code. What we found was more chilling than we could have imagined. Project Silence wasn't just some government experiment. It was part of a much larger, more powerful network that spanned the globe. As we analyzed the documents, we discovered that the project had been linked to an elite group of global leaders, politicians, CEOs, and military generals who had been working together for years to manipulate global events. They were known as the Collective. They were the hidden puppeteers pulling the strings behind world events, shaping public opinion, and controlling entire countries with the help of the mind control signal. The more we uncovered, the more we realized just how deeply this web of control ran. The Collective wasn't just about influencing elections or manipulating stock markets. They were orchestrating wars, economic crashes, and even natural disasters, all to keep themselves in power. Project Silence was their ultimate weapon, a tool to not only control the thoughts of individuals but to direct the course of history itself. The signal was already in place, ready to be activated. The global population was unaware, but they were about to become its unwitting subjects. It wasn't just about political power. The Collective had their hands in every major industry: finance, technology, healthcare, media. They controlled the narrative, controlling what people believed, how they voted, and what products they bought. They even had plans for the next phase of Project Silence, one that would involve deploying the signal to more than just the public. It would be used to control the very leaders of the world. Imagine a government that could force its leaders to think a certain way, to make decisions based on manipulated thoughts and desires. That was the goal, a world where no one could make a decision without the Collective's influence. But as we dug deeper, we began to notice something disturbing. There were signs that some of our own people might already be compromised. I remember the first time I felt like I was truly being watched. It was late one night, and I was going over some of the encrypted documents with Rachel, one of the journalists on my team. We were sitting in my office, the blinds drawn, the soft hum of the computer the only sound in the room. I turned to Rachel to show her something I'd uncovered, and there it was, a pattern. We'd been getting a series of anonymous tips, all pointing to one thing. It was clear now. Someone from the inside was feeding information to the collective. Someone in our own team. I froze, the weight of the realization hitting me hard. Could we have been infiltrated? Was the truth being manipulated even within our own ranks? Rachel saw the look on my face and immediately turned pale. Maya, you don't think... I didn't want to believe it. But as I looked around the room, at the files we'd gathered, the phones we'd used, the emails we'd sent, it seemed almost impossible that we hadn't been compromised. The feeling of paranoia was suffocating. But there was no time to dwell on it. We had to push forward, even if it meant risking everything. That night I couldn't sleep. The shadows in my room seemed to grow longer, and every creak of the floorboards sent my heart racing. I knew we were getting closer to the truth, but I also knew that every step forward meant a greater risk. The collective wasn't going to let us expose them without a fight. And the deeper we got, the more dangerous it became. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. The collective wasn't just a shadowy cabal, it was an all-powerful, ruthless organization, and we had just scratched the surface of what they were capable of. We were in a fight for our lives, and if we didn't find a way to expose them soon, it would be too late for all of us. The more we learned about Project Silence, the more we understood that we were no longer just journalists. We had become the resistance. But as we delved deeper into the conspiracy, it was becoming increasingly clear that the forces behind Project Silence were everywhere, watching, listening, and manipulating in ways we hadn't even begun to comprehend. It was a full-scale war, and we were standing at the front lines, armed only with the truth. We knew that to expose Project Silence, we needed more than just fragmented documents and vague testimonies from whistleblowers. We needed hard evidence, something irrefutable that would prove to the world that the mind control signal existed, that it had already begun to spread, and that there were people willing to kill to keep it under wraps. We needed proof that would send shockwaves across the globe. Rachel, James, and I spent countless hours researching and cross-referencing every piece of information we had. We pulled up government contracts, sifted through years of news reports, and even visited underground bunkers in Europe where we believed some of the experiments were taking place. The deeper we dug, the darker it got. Each new piece of information we uncovered led to another layer of the conspiracy, revealing the extent of the project's reach. It was as if the rabbit hole had no end. But not all the clues were hidden in official documents or secret locations. Some were right in front of us, if we were brave enough to look. We began to realize that the media itself had been compromised. News outlets, television networks, social media platforms, everything we consumed daily was being influenced by Project Silence. But how? The answer was simpler than we expected. The signal was embedded into the very fabric of the media we consumed. Television broadcasts, radio shows, and social media algorithms all had the capacity to transmit the mind control signal, and it had been active for years. The media wasn't just a tool for spreading information, it was a weapon, carefully crafted to shape public opinion and guide society's actions. One night, as I sat in the office alone, poring over encrypted government files, I stumbled across something disturbing. A list of influential world leaders who were scheduled to attend a top-secret global summit in a few weeks. The summit wasn't public knowledge, and the names on that list weren't just politicians. They were the world's most powerful figures, CEOs of global corporations, military generals, and even members of royal families. The collective had been using this summit as an opportunity to tighten their control, and it was no coincidence that the meeting was taking place just as Project Silence was nearing its final phase. Everything was falling into place, and I realized with a sinking feeling that if we didn't act quickly, the summit would mark the beginning of a new world order, one where freedom of thought would no longer exist. Rachel and I decided to focus on exposing the signal's presence in the media. We hacked into a few old broadcasts and began analyzing the hidden frequencies embedded within the transmissions. It was a long shot, but we had to start somewhere. After hours of painstaking work, we finally found it, the signal. It was subtle at first, just a faint hum beneath the surface of the broadcast. But when amplified, it was clear. This was it. The signal that had been controlling minds for years was real, and it was in every household, every screen, every speaker. The project had already succeeded, and the global population had no idea they were being influenced. But this discovery came at a cost. As we continued our investigation, we began to notice something unsettling. Our communications were being monitored. Our phones started acting strangely, cutting out during important conversations. We received anonymous threats warning us to stop digging, to abandon the story. But there was no turning back now. We had uncovered something too important to let go. The world needed to know the truth, even if it meant risking our lives. We knew we had to get the evidence to the public, but we couldn't do it alone. We needed allies, and fast. That's when we decided to reach out to other independent journalists, activists, and former government employees who had been in similar situations. The resistance was growing, but it was also becoming more fragmented. The collective had already infiltrated many of these networks, planting moles to sabotage any efforts to expose them. Trust was hard to come by, but we had to find a way to unite our efforts before it was too late. The pressure was mounting, and the closer we got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. It felt like we were walking on a tightrope, one wrong step away from falling into the abyss. But we couldn't stop. The signal was everywhere, and if we didn't act now, it would be too late to undo the damage. The weight of the last few weeks was starting to feel unbearable. Every conversation felt like it was being monitored. Every decision I made was followed by a sense of dread. I knew that someone was watching, that someone was waiting for us to slip up. But the deeper we dug into Project Silence, the clearer it became. We weren't just uncovering a government project anymore. We were exposing a global network, a system of control that had been in place for decades. Everything shifted one night when Rachel and I were going through a series of old files we had hacked from a government server. We had been piecing together data from various sources, media reports, classified documents, and encrypted communications. We knew we were close, but the final breakthrough came when we found a video, hidden in an obscure corner of a lab report. The file was labeled simply, "Final Phase, Transmission Activation." We hesitated before opening it. The label sounded ominous, but curiosity got the better of us. As the video loaded, I saw a room filled with high-ranking government officials and scientists. It looked like a planning session. A man in a sharp suit, someone I didn't recognize, stood at the front of the room, giving a presentation. He spoke with an air of authority that sent chills down my spine. "Project Silence is entering its final phase," the man said. "We have tested the signal on a small scale, and the results are beyond our expectations. It's time to initiate the full-scale operation. The signal will be broadcast globally, and with it, we will control the minds of the masses. Public opinion will no longer be an accident of free will, it will be carefully engineered. We will control the actions of governments, businesses, and individuals, all under the guise of communication." My heart pounded as I watched. The signal wasn't just a tool for mass persuasion. It was a weapon, an invisible force that could dictate the future of humanity. It would bend the will of the population without them even knowing it. They would never be able to resist it. It was already everywhere, embedded in the media they consumed daily, in the social media algorithms they used, in the television broadcasts they watched. And now, they were preparing to launch it on a global scale. The man in the video continued, "We have already tested the signal on key figures in the political and business sectors. The results are promising. The next step is to roll it out on a global scale, control the message, control the people." As the video ended, Rachel and I were left in stunned silence. This was it. This was the proof we had been looking for. Project Silence wasn't just a research project gone wrong. It was a global operation designed to control the world's population, and it was about to be activated. But the video raised more questions than it answered. Who was behind this? Who had the power to pull the strings of global society in such a way? And why hadn't the world noticed the changes happening right under their noses? Had they all been manipulated into submission without realizing it? We now had the smoking gun, but we also knew that getting this information out would be far from easy. The people behind this project had resources that dwarfed ours. They could easily erase us from existence if they wanted to. But we couldn't let fear control us. We had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. I made the decision then and there. We would go public. We would broadcast the video, no matter the risks. The world needed to know what was happening, and they needed to know before the signal was fully activated. But as I prepared to make the final push, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was already a step ahead of us. We had one chance to make this count. We had to expose them, and we had to do it now. But the closer we got to the truth, the more I realized that the real battle had only just begun. The people behind Project Silence weren't going to let us expose them without a fight. And that fight would determine the future of humanity. The shock of the video had barely settled in before things took a turn. Our discovery of Project Silence's true nature wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a death sentence. The weight of the information we now held felt like a ticking bomb strapped to our chests. The closer we got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. But we weren't backing down. We couldn't. The world needed to know. The problem was, every step we took forward seemed to make us a bigger target. As we prepared to broadcast the evidence, we were hit with one obstacle after another. Our phones were bugged, our emails were intercepted, and even our safe houses were compromised. It felt like the collective had eyes everywhere. But they underestimated one thing: we weren't alone. The resistance, though fragmented and scattered, was beginning to rally. Other independent journalists, whistleblowers, and activists started reaching out to us, offering their support and sharing their own findings. Slowly but surely, a network was forming. People who had all been affected by the far-reaching control of Project Silence. But it wasn't just the surveillance that was getting to us. The more we dug into the project's origins, the more we uncovered a tangled web of deceit, manipulation, and global corruption. It was clear now that Project Silence had been decades in the making. What started as a small-scale government experiment had grown into a vast operation that reached every corner of the globe. The signal wasn't just embedded in the media, it was being integrated into the very infrastructure of society: hospitals, schools, governments, corporations. The goal was simple: control every aspect of human life, from the thoughts in your head to the decisions you made at the ballot box. One evening, as Rachel and I reviewed more classified reports, I stumbled upon a document that seemed to confirm our worst fears. It was a list of key moments in history that had been influenced by the signal. Events like elections, wars, and even stock market crashes had been carefully engineered by those behind Project Silence. The signal had been used to sway public opinion on a massive scale, manipulating the course of history itself. And that was just the beginning. The final phase wasn't just about controlling thoughts. It was about creating a new world order, one where the collective had total domination over every aspect of life. I felt the ground shift beneath me as I processed the implications of what I was reading. The sheer scale of it was mind-boggling. Every major global event for the past few decades had been influenced by this secret project, and now they were preparing to implement it on a global scale. The signal would soon be so deeply embedded in society that no one would be able to break free from its influence. It was the perfect plan: no wars, no overt control, just a slow, insidious manipulation of the human mind. We had to stop them. But how? We were small and disorganized, fighting an enemy with infinite resources. We had the truth on our side, but that didn't mean anything if we couldn't get it out to the public. That's when the first major twist hit us. We had been led to believe that the signal was simply a tool for mass influence. But as we dug deeper into the final phase of Project Silence, we uncovered something more horrifying. The signal wasn't just being used to influence people, it was also being used to create ideal subjects, individuals whose minds could be fully controlled and manipulated. These people would be implanted with chips that allowed the collective to monitor their thoughts and actions in real time. The implications were chilling. The signal could turn anyone into a puppet, a person whose thoughts, desires, and actions were not their own. They could be made to do anything, believe anything. And worse, they wouldn't even know it. They would live their lives as if nothing had changed, all while being silently controlled by the collective. As we pieced together this new information, I felt a growing sense of dread. This was no longer just about exposing a secret project. It was about exposing the truth of what humanity had become. We were fighting for the survival of free will itself. But the deeper we dug, the more it seemed like we were fighting a losing battle. The forces behind Project Silence were vast, and they were getting stronger by the day. Then, just when we thought we had uncovered everything, another twist emerged. One of our own was compromised. It started with small things, little inconsistencies, strange behaviors that didn't quite add up. But soon, it became clear, one of the journalists on our team had been implanted with one of the mind-control chips. They were being watched, controlled, and manipulated by the collective. It hit us like a punch to the gut. Could it be Rachel? Or James? Or was it someone else entirely? Who could we trust? Who was truly on our side? The paranoia set in quickly. It was one thing to fight against a faceless enemy. But when that enemy was inside your ranks, controlling your every move, it became something else entirely. Our investigation was no longer just about uncovering the truth, it was about survival. But despite the growing tension, we knew one thing for sure: we couldn't stop. The world needed to know what was happening. We had to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything. The paranoia that had been growing inside us finally reached a boiling point. It wasn't just the constant threat of being watched anymore. The betrayal, the feeling that someone within our own ranks was working against us, was a weight I couldn't escape. Every small glance, every unexpected silence, made me question if anyone around me could truly be trusted. It started with Rachel. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. She had been with me from the beginning, fighting alongside me through every twist and turn of this investigation. But something was different about her. Her behavior had started to change. She seemed distracted, less focused, as if she wasn't fully present when we worked together. At first, I wrote it off as the pressure of our investigation taking its toll. After all, we were all exhausted. But as time went on, I began to notice inconsistencies in her actions. She would leave the room for long periods, take phone calls that she quickly hung up as soon as I walked in, and seemed a little too eager to dismiss certain leads or documents we uncovered. I tried to dismiss the feeling gnawing at me, but one night, everything fell apart. We were working late at the office, trying to finalize the details of our next move. Rachel had been unusually quiet all evening, her focus split between the screen and her phone. James had left to grab some coffee, and I found myself alone with her. That was when it happened. I had just uncovered a new file, something that could crack open the final phase of the Project Silence timeline. I turned to show it to Rachel, but she wasn't looking at the screen. Her eyes were fixed on the door, as if waiting for something, or someone. That's when I saw it. The slight but deliberate shift in her expression as she reached for her phone, typing a quick message under the table. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't normal. It wasn't the behavior of someone who had been with me, side by side, for months. I decided to confront her. Rachel, what's going on? You've been acting strange. You can't keep avoiding this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. There was a moment of hesitation, like she was deciding whether or not to say something. Then she smiled, a forced, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Maya. Just a little tired, that's all." But I knew something was off. It was in the way she said it, the edge in her voice that had never been there before. I felt the air between us shift, a wall that hadn't been there before. My suspicion grew, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Not yet. As I turned back to the computer, I noticed the small slip of paper she had hastily shoved into her pocket, almost as though she had tried to hide it. The way she moved was too deliberate, too careful. My mind was racing now. I waited until James returned to the office, then, without saying a word, I reached for the piece of paper. I unfolded it quickly, my eyes scanning the words written in a hurried, scrawled hand. "They know. You've been compromised. Stay silent. We have eyes on you." My heart sank. It wasn't just Rachel's behavior that had changed. It was her involvement with them, the collective. She was working for them. I could barely breathe as I processed what I had just read. Rachel wasn't just a journalist on our team anymore. She was a mole. A spy planted to sabotage everything we were working for. I felt betrayed, but worse than that, I felt completely alone. The very person I had trusted most had been feeding information to the enemy. What did that mean for the rest of us? Who else had been compromised? And how far had the collective infiltrated our team? I turned to Rachel, who had been watching me closely, her face devoid of emotion. "So it's true," I whispered, more to myself than to her. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with cold eyes, as if I had known all along. "Maya," she said, her voice almost pitying. "You've been so focused on exposing them, but you don't understand. You're already too late. They've been in control for years." I stood there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. Was she trying to warn me, or was she manipulating me? Was she even telling the truth? But there was no time to dwell on it. I couldn't let Rachel, no, the collective, win. This betrayal, as painful as it was only the beginning of a much larger, much more dangerous game. We had come too far, risked too much to back down now. "Get out," I said, my voice breaking the silence. I couldn't look at her anymore. Rachel didn't fight back. Instead, she just nodded, as if she had already anticipated this moment. As she walked out of the office, I knew this wasn't the end of the betrayal. It was only the start of the final showdown. I turned back to the documents, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. We had been infiltrated, but we still had one shot. We had to expose the signal, the collective, everything we had learned. But now, with Rachel gone, I couldn't help but wonder, who else was still playing both sides? Who could I trust? The line between friend and foe had blurred, and the stakes had never been higher. It wasn't the first time we'd been followed. Hell, it wasn't even the fifth. But this time was different. I could feel it in my bones. The game had changed. I had known all along that the deeper we dug into Project Silence, the more dangerous it would get. But nothing had prepared me for the cold, calculated nature of what was happening now. We weren't just investigating a corrupt project anymore. We were running for our lives. It started innocently enough. Rachel had been gone for a few hours after her betrayal, and I was left alone with James. We were sifting through the last of the documents Rachel had hastily left behind, trying to make sense of her involvement. The shock was still there, hanging like a heavy cloud, but the urgency to keep moving forward was growing stronger. We couldn't stop now. We were so close to exposing everything. But something felt off that afternoon. The air outside was unnervingly still. James and I had been in the office for hours, working nonstop, but something was nagging at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. James, you ever get that feeling like you're not alone? I asked, not looking up from the screen. He shot me a quick glance. Yeah. I think we both know the answer to that by now. It was a subtle thing at first, an odd sensation, the feeling of being watched followed. But when I looked out of the window, I saw them. 2 men, standing across the street, just outside a black sedan. They weren't doing anything overt. No glaring, no waving. Just standing, watching, waiting. My heart raced as I recognized them, the same men who had been tailing us for weeks, always just out of reach, always in the background. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't random surveillance. They knew everything. They knew we were getting too close to the truth, and they were getting desperate. But it wasn't just the 2 men I had to worry about. The collective had far-reaching resources, and they could send anyone, anywhere, to stop us. We had to move fast, before they decided it was time to make us disappear for good. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice low but urgent. James didn't hesitate. We grabbed our laptops, a few documents, and rushed out of the office, making sure we weren't being followed. But as we stepped into the elevator, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. As soon as we hit the street, the pressure was unbearable. We tried to blend in, ducking into crowds, moving quickly but cautiously. My eyes darted around, scanning for any sign of danger. That's when I saw the black sedan again, this time much closer, parked across the street. The 2 men were still in it, but now the car's engine was running. I felt my pulse spike. Move! I hissed at James. We quickened our pace, heading down an alley to avoid the main street. But it didn't matter. We were already compromised. I heard the screech of tires and the rumble of the sedan's engine behind us. We weren't just being followed, we were being hunted. James, this way! I shouted, pulling him into another side street. My mind raced. We had no plan. No escape route. We were being cornered, and every exit seemed to lead to another dead end. It felt like an eternity before we turned a corner and spotted a narrow stairwell leading up to the rooftop of a nearby building. Without thinking, we bolted for it, our footsteps echoing against the walls. But the men were fast. I could hear their footsteps behind us, growing closer with each second. As we reached the top of the building, I risked a glance behind me. There was no sign of them yet, but I knew it wouldn't be long before they caught up. I grabbed James by the arm, pulling him toward the edge of the roof. We have to jump, I said, my voice shaking. There was no time to think. The men were almost there. The drop was high, but it was our only shot. Without another word, we jumped. The impact wasn't as bad as I'd feared, but the landing knocked the wind out of me. We rolled to absorb the blow, and I scrambled to my feet, helping James up. We had to keep moving. The men wouldn't be far behind, and the longer we stayed in one place, the more likely it was that we'd be caught. We ran through the back alleys, dodging traffic and trying to blend in with the crowds. But every step we took felt like it was being tracked. My heart raced as we ducked into another side street, looking for an escape route. Just when I thought we might lose them, I turned around to find a car blocking our path. 2 men stepped out, their faces cold and determined. It was a dead end. "We're not done yet," James muttered, his voice tight with adrenaline. But I knew the truth. There was no escaping them. They were too powerful, too well prepared. We had no choice but to face them head on. But just as the men closed in, the sound of a familiar voice reached my ears. A figure emerged from the shadows, one of our allies. He was holding a gun, his face set with resolve. It was the last person I had expected to see, but at that moment, he was the only one who could save us. "Get in the car," he said, his voice calm but urgent. We didn't hesitate. We ran toward the car, jumping inside just as the doors slammed shut. The man floored the accelerator, and the car sped off, leaving the men from the collective behind. But as we drove through the streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. We had made it out this time, but the collective wasn't done with us. They would keep coming, and they wouldn't stop until they silenced us for good. The night after our escape was the longest I'd ever experienced. Every minute felt like a lifetime as we drove through the dark, dimly lit streets, the tires of the car humming on the pavement beneath us. James sat beside me, his face a mask of tense resolve, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. We had narrowly escaped death, but the real fight had just begun. The man who had saved us, Max, wasn't someone we had expected. I had known him once, years ago, back when I first started in journalism. He had been a fellow investigative reporter, a strong-willed person with a passion for uncovering corruption. But when I left that world to focus on smaller, independent stories, Max had disappeared. I hadn't heard from him since. Yet here he was, pulling us out of harm's way when we had nowhere else to turn. Max didn't say much as we sped through the back streets of the city, avoiding the main roads. He kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The tension in the car was suffocating, and for a long time, none of us spoke. The only sound was the engine purring steadily beneath us. We didn't go to a hotel or a familiar safe house. Instead, Max drove us to a hidden location, one that had been off our radar. It was a small, nondescript apartment building tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. The kind of place you'd walk past every day without ever noticing. A perfect place to disappear for a while. Max led us up a creaky staircase to the top floor, where he unlocked a door and ushered us inside. The room was sparsely furnished, the walls bare except for a few hastily put-up maps and charts pinned to the wall. It wasn't much, but it was secure. And right now, that was all that mattered. "You two get some rest," Max said, locking the door behind us. "We need to figure out our next move, but for now, we stay low." I collapsed onto the couch, my head spinning with everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. The betrayal, the chase, and now this, the feeling of being completely alone in a city full of shadows. I was supposed to be uncovering the truth, not running for my life. But now, the truth felt more distant than ever. We were just a few steps ahead of the people who wanted us dead. James sank into a chair beside me, running a hand through his hair. "I can't believe Rachel. She was one of us. I know," I interrupted. "It doesn't make sense. I trusted her. We all did." But the truth was more complicated than that. Rachel wasn't just a mole. She had been a part of the collective all along, and she had been playing us from the start. Her role wasn't just about sabotage. It was about ensuring we never reached the final phase of our investigation. She had been feeding us just enough information to keep us digging, but not enough to actually expose the truth. She knew everything we were going to find. And yet, she still let us get close enough to uncover the signal's existence. I couldn't shake the thought. Was there anyone we could trust? Max had saved us tonight, but how could we be sure he wasn't part of the same system that had been trying to kill us for weeks? I turned to him, my eyes narrowed. "Max, why are you helping us? What's your stake in this?" Max paused, taking a deep breath before meeting my gaze. "I've been fighting the collective for years, Maya. I was one of the first to realize just how far their influence goes. They didn't just infiltrate the government, they infiltrated every part of society. But I was too deep in the game to get out cleanly. When I saw what you two were uncovering, I knew it was my chance to finish what I started." "So you've been on the run too?" I asked, my voice softer now. Max nodded. "I've been hiding for months, moving from one place to another. The collective is everywhere. But they don't know about this safe house. It's the last place they'd think to look." I wasn't sure if I believed him. But in that moment, I didn't have a choice. We were trapped in a web of lies and manipulation, and Max was our only lifeline. At least for now. As the hours passed, we huddled together, reviewing everything we had learned so far. We went over every piece of evidence, every document, and every video. The more we looked at it, the more we realized just how far-reaching the conspiracy was. The collective wasn't just about mind control. They were rewriting history, controlling every aspect of life, and manipulating world events on a scale we couldn't even comprehend. But we still had one chance to stop them. The summit, the one we had uncovered in the documents, was scheduled to take place in just a few days. If we could infiltrate it and expose the truth to the world, we could stop Project Silence from going global. But it wasn't going to be easy. The collective had eyes everywhere. They would be watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. "We have to move quickly," Max said, breaking my thoughts. "The longer we stay here, the more dangerous it becomes." I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. We had the information. We had the evidence. Now, we just had to get it to the world before the collective locked it all down. But the clock was ticking. And I knew that if we failed, the world would never know the truth. We would be silenced, just like the rest of them. The morning light filtered through the blinds of the safe house, casting long shadows across the room. I hadn't slept much. The anxiety gnawed at me, keeping me wide awake. The summit, the final phase of Project Silence, was only days away. If we didn't act now, the signal would be broadcasted globally, and the world would fall under the control of the collective. We couldn't let that happen. We had to expose them before it was too late. Max had been preparing us for this moment since we arrived. He'd already infiltrated the collective's operations on a small scale, but the summit was different. It was the heart of the operation. The key players, the politicians, the military officials, the business magnates, would all be there, gathered in one place, under the watchful eye of the collective. This was our chance to strike at the center of their power. "We've got one shot at this," Max said, pulling a map of the summit venue out from his bag. "We need to get inside and plant this evidence, everything we've uncovered, before the signal gets activated." The summit would be held at a luxury hotel on the outskirts of the city. It was heavily guarded, and security was tighter than ever. We had already seen the scope of the collective's power, and I knew that getting past security wouldn't be easy. They would have eyes on every corner of the venue, and they would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. "But how?" James asked, his voice tight with tension. "We don't exactly blend in with the high-profile guests they'll be hosting. We need an angle, something they won't expect." Max looked over the map, his finger tracing the layout of the building. He stopped at a section marked VIP access. "This is where the most important people will be. If we can get in there, we'll have direct access to the main conference room and all the security systems." I raised an eyebrow. "How do you plan to get us in there without getting caught?" Max's eyes gleamed with the same determination I'd seen in him years ago. "I have contacts within the collective, people who owe me favors. One of them is a security officer working the summit. He can get us access to the VIP section. We just need to be ready to move quickly. Once we're inside, we'll split up. Rachel and I will head for the main conference room while you two handle the tech, planting the evidence on the system." Rachel. Her name still stung, even though she was long gone. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, but Max had insisted on involving her in the plan. She had been a part of our team, once, and she had the skill set we needed to get into the heart of the summit. I nodded reluctantly. "All right, we do it your way. But we have to be ready for anything. The collective won't just sit back and let us walk in. They'll be looking for us." Max gave a grim smile. "They'll be looking for us, sure. But they won't be expecting us to come at them head on." We went over the plan again, this time with more precision. We had to be fast, precise, and invisible. The summit security would be watching the cameras, monitoring the guests, and ensuring no one without the proper credentials would get anywhere near the inner circle. But we had one advantage: we knew the truth. We knew what they were planning, and we had the evidence to expose them. The signal. The mind control. The manipulation of global events. We had everything they didn't want the world to see. As we gathered our things and prepared to leave the safe house, the air felt thick with anticipation. I kept telling myself that this would be the moment we could change everything. We had to expose Project Silence, to show the world that they weren't in control of their own thoughts. We couldn't let them win. We couldn't let them succeed. But as we loaded into the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The closer we got to the summit, the more I felt the walls closing in. The collective wasn't going to make this easy. And with every mile we drove, the weight of what we were about to do pressed heavier on my chest. The closer we got to the venue, the more I realized this wasn't just a fight for the truth. This was a fight for our lives. We arrived at the venue with minutes to spare, our nerves frayed and hearts racing. The luxury hotel towered above us, its glass and steel exterior reflecting the city's skyline in sharp contrast to the dimming evening light. This place was a symbol of power, everything the collective represented. The world's most influential people were gathering here, under the guise of an innocent summit, but in truth, it was the final stage for their sinister plans. And we were about to walk straight into their lair. Max had given us our credentials, a mix of fake identities and real ones from his network, but even with that, I could feel the tension tightening in my chest. The place was crawling with security, plainclothes guards at every turn. We had to move fast, stay focused, and avoid drawing attention. We were entering a lion's den, and we needed to be the quiet, unseen mice. "Stay sharp," Max said, his voice low and commanding. "Once we're in, stick to the plan. We've got one shot at this." We stepped out of the car, walking toward the entrance with deliberate steps. I felt like we were actors in a high-stakes game, each of us playing a role. The doorman greeted us with a practiced smile, his eyes briefly scanning our fake IDs before stepping aside to let us in. The lobby was lavish, elegant marble floors, glimmering chandeliers overhead. It was designed to impress, to showcase power, wealth, and influence. But none of that mattered to me now. I wasn't here to admire the decor. I was here to expose a conspiracy that could destroy everything we held dear. Max led the way, smoothly blending in with the crowd of VIPs as we walked past security checkpoints and into the heart of the building. The air felt heavy with secrets. Every guest, every conversation seemed carefully crafted, as though everyone here had something to hide. I couldn't help but feel like we were surrounded by sharks, predators just waiting for us to make the wrong move. As we approached the elevators, Max gave us a quick glance. "We're taking the back stairs to avoid the main cameras. The VIP floor is above us." James nodded, his face pale but determined. We had all agreed on the risks. Once we were inside, there would be no turning back. This was it. The moment we either succeeded or disappeared without a trace. We slipped into the stairwell, moving quickly and quietly. The sound of our footsteps was the only noise in the otherwise silent space. As we ascended to the VIP floor, I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. It was impossible not to notice the heaviness of the situation. If we were caught now, everything would be lost. But if we succeeded, if we could plant the evidence and expose the signal, we could end Project Silence before it took hold of the entire world. We reached the top floor and crept into the corridor. The VIP section was just around the corner, guarded by 2 heavily armed security personnel. Max turned to us, his expression tight with focus. "I'll take care of the guards," he whispered. "When I give the signal, go straight for the conference room. There's a control panel in the back. Plant the evidence and get out. Fast." We nodded, bracing ourselves for the final push. There was no room for hesitation now. Max approached the guards, his movements smooth, his voice calm as he struck up a casual conversation. It was a perfect distraction. While the guards were occupied, we slipped past them and into the heart of the VIP section. The doors to the conference room were ahead, just a few more steps, and we would be in the place where it all began. The final phase of Project Silence was waiting to unfold. We reached the doors. I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. This was the moment that could change everything. I glanced at James, who nodded silently. He was as ready as I was. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The conference room was grand, just as I expected. Long tables filled with wealthy executives, government officials, and military leaders, all of them oblivious to the fact that they were sitting in the epicenter of a global conspiracy. Their discussions were low, hushed murmurs, filled with the kind of power plays and manipulations that made my stomach churn. But none of them knew what was about to happen. They didn't know that we were about to expose the very system that had been controlling their every move. I scanned the room quickly, noting the security cameras positioned at strategic angles. We had to be careful. One wrong move, and the entire operation would collapse. We had no choice but to go straight for the back panel. The hidden systems that controlled the broadcast signal were buried within the infrastructure of this room, and if we could just plant the evidence there, it would expose everything. James went to work immediately, his hands flying over the tech. I kept my eyes on the door, watching for any sign of danger. Max was still dealing with the guards, keeping them distracted long enough for us to do our job. The clock was ticking. Then I saw it, movement in the corner of my eye. A figure approaching the door. I froze. Was it the security? Or was it someone else? My heart skipped a beat as the figure came closer, and I realized with a sickening certainty that the collective had anticipated our move. They were already here. I barely had time to think before the figure at the door stepped into the room. My heart stopped. I knew that face. It was one I hadn't expected to see again, not here, not now. But there she was, standing in the doorway, calm and collected, as if she had been waiting for us all along. Rachel. It took me a moment to process the scene. My breath caught in my throat as the realization hit me. She hadn't just been a mole. She hadn't just betrayed us. She was the one pulling the strings from within the collective. And now, here she was, watching us like puppets caught in her trap. She didn't say anything at first. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on me for a moment too long. There was no emotion in her gaze, nothing like the friend I once knew. It was like she had already detached herself from the person she had been. She was part of something much bigger now. So, this is what it's all been about, I finally whispered, my voice trembling. You were never on our side. You've been working with them the whole time. Rachel didn't flinch. She simply stepped further into the room, closing the door behind her. Her expression was eerily calm, as if none of this was a big deal. It's not personal, Maya, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. You should have known better. I never believed in the way you did things. Always chasing the truth. Truth doesn't matter anymore. The collective is the future. We're shaping a new world. I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest, but I quickly swallowed it. There was no point in trying to reason with her. I had to focus. Our mission had to come first. We were so close. We couldn't let Rachel or the collective take this from us. You've got to be kidding me, James muttered, eyes wide in disbelief. You've been helping these people destroy free will. You're okay with that? Rachel's lips curled into a faint smile, almost as if she were humoring him. Free will? She repeated. There is no such thing anymore. The signal is already in place. You think you can expose it and change anything? The world is already under our control. You just haven't realized it yet. I glanced at the control panel in the back of the room, the one James had been working on. We couldn't waste any more time. We had to plant the evidence now, before it was too late. But there was something about Rachel's presence, something unsettling in the air that told me we weren't just dealing with betrayal anymore. We were in the middle of a far larger scheme. Suddenly, I heard a sharp click. The panel was locked. My pulse quickened. The evidence we had gathered, the documents, the videos, the proof of the signal, was stuck. Rachel had anticipated our every move. She had already cut us off from accessing the system. "I can't let you do this," Rachel said, her voice colder now. "You can't expose the signal. The world isn't ready for the truth. They'll resist it, and when they do, it'll all fall apart. People will destroy each other. The collective is the only way to ensure peace, order, and control." Her words stung, but they also confirmed something we had feared. The collective didn't just want power, they wanted to reshape humanity in their image. They had been using the signal to control people's minds for years, and now they were going to make sure everyone was under their thumb for good. I glanced over at Max, who had finally managed to finish dealing with the guards outside. He came up behind me, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the situation. "We don't have time for this," he said, voice low. "Maya, we need to finish this now. It's not just about exposing the truth, it's about stopping this from going any further." I nodded, my mind working in overdrive. We couldn't just sit here and argue with Rachel. We had to do something. Fast. My eyes darted back to the control panel, where James was still struggling to crack the encryption. We needed to get past it, and Rachel knew that. She wasn't going to let us succeed without a fight. Before I could move, Rachel stepped forward, pressing a button on the control panel. The room's lights flickered, and the door to the conference room slammed shut, locking us in. It was a trap, and we had walked right into it. "You think you can stop it?" she asked, her voice rising with a strange, almost manic edge. "It's already too late. You're just pawns in this game. The world belongs to the collective now. Your resistance doesn't matter. You can't win." "Maybe we can't," I said, my voice steady despite the fear churning inside me. "But you've underestimated us. You've underestimated what the truth can do." Rachel's expression faltered for a brief moment, and I took the opportunity. I rushed to the panel, slamming my hand down on the keyboard, trying to break through the lock. The seconds felt like hours as I frantically typed, but the screen didn't budge. But then, I heard a small beep. James had cracked it. The screen blinked, and the evidence we needed appeared before us, clear and undeniable. This was it. The proof that could expose Project Silence to the world. "Now, Maya," Max whispered urgently. "We need to broadcast it. No more waiting." I quickly accessed the system and began to transmit the files, sending them to every news outlet, every social media channel, and every platform we could access. It was happening. The truth was out. The signal could be exposed, and the collective's hold on the world was starting to slip. But just as I hit the final key to finalize the broadcast, I heard Rachel scream, "You won't get away with this!" Her voice was filled with desperation, and I knew in that moment that she would stop at nothing to make sure we failed. The lights in the room dimmed, and the air thickened with the electric charge of impending danger. We had exposed the truth, but now we had to survive the aftermath. The broadcast was live. The truth was out there, raw and unfiltered, for the world to see. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, the sense of accomplishment mixed with fear. We had succeeded in exposing Project Silence, but we had no illusions left. The battle wasn't over yet. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. The room grew colder, the heavy silence broken only by the rapid clicking of the keyboard as James finalized the transmission. My eyes stayed on the screen as the evidence began to flood the world's media channels. This was it. The signal was out, and the world would finally know the truth. There was no turning back. But then came the sound. A soft hiss, followed by a sudden screech of metal. The walls vibrated, and the overhead lights flickered violently. It was a sound I would never forget, the sound of control slipping through their fingers, of the collective's carefully constructed world beginning to unravel. "Shut it down! Now!" Rachel screamed. Her voice was frantic, but there was something else in her eyes, fear, yes, but also rage. She was fighting for everything she had believed in, everything she had helped build. I knew what she was going to do next, and I didn't have time to stop her. Before any of us could react, Rachel lunged toward the control panel. She slapped her palm down on the emergency shut-off button, and the room went pitch black. The transmission was severed. The entire network went dark. Panic surged through me. "No!" I shouted, scrambling toward the panel. But it was too late. The broadcast was cut. The truth, the one thing we had fought for, was buried again under the weight of the collective's power. But Rachel wasn't finished. I saw the look in her eyes as she stepped away from the panel, her face twisted with a mixture of victory and anger. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You think exposing the truth will save you? The world isn't ready for it. The collective won't let it happen." James moved first, pulling me away from the panel and toward the door. We had to get out. Now. But as we reached for the door, we were met with the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing in the now silent conference room. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, to see a group of men, heavily armed, stepping into the room. They weren't just security. They were part of the collective's enforcers, agents trained to eliminate any threats to their operation. They were here for us. Rachel stepped back, her expression unreadable. She wasn't helping us now. She was no longer a teammate. She was a part of the system we had tried to destroy. I glanced at Max, but he was already moving. His eyes were sharp, scanning the room, looking for an exit. "We have to move, now!" he barked. Before I could make sense of it, we were running. We didn't even look back as we dashed for the side door, the armed guards hot on our heels. I heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire echoing down the hall behind us, and I knew we didn't have much time. Max led the way, pushing through the door and into the stairwell. "Go!" he shouted, shoving us forward. We ran as fast as we could, the adrenaline keeping us moving despite the exhaustion and fear gripping my every step. The building felt like a maze, endless corridors and locked doors, but Max knew where we were headed. We had a small window of time to get out. The guards were still coming, and I could hear their heavy boots pounding in pursuit. But we had no choice. We had to escape. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for rest. But I kept going, focusing only on the next step, on getting to safety. The stairs seemed to stretch forever, the noise of our footsteps mingling with the distant sounds of chaos echoing throughout the hotel. We were so close, but I knew they wouldn't let us get away without a fight. Then, just as we reached the bottom floor, I saw the exit. The door was unlocked, just as Max had promised. Freedom was only a few yards away. But as I reached for the door handle, I froze. A sharp pain exploded in my chest. I looked down in disbelief to see blood pooling around me, a dark stain spreading quickly. It wasn't my imagination. I'd been shot. I gasped, stumbling backward, my body faltering. James grabbed me, his face pale with panic. "No! No, Maya, stay with me!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. Max was at my side instantly, supporting me as I crumpled to the ground. I could barely breathe, the pain radiating from my chest like a fire. Everything around me blurred, and I felt myself slipping. "Hold on!" Max's voice was frantic as he pulled me up again. "We're getting out. Stay with us." I wanted to respond, to tell him it was too late, but the words wouldn't come. The world around me felt distant, fading. And then, everything went black. I woke up in darkness, the kind of darkness that feels suffocating. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I was still in the middle of the fight or if everything had simply become a long, twisted dream. But then I felt it, the coldness of the concrete beneath me, the slight hum of machinery, the smell of antiseptic and sweat. I opened my eyes slowly, squinting against the blinding light overhead. My chest felt tight, as if something heavy was pressing down on it. Every breath was labored, every inch of my body aching. It took me a moment to realize I was in a hospital room, of sorts. It wasn't anything luxurious, just a dimly lit, makeshift space that reeked of desperation. Max was sitting at my bedside, his face a mixture of exhaustion and concern. His brow furrowed as soon as he saw me stir, and he leaned in closer. "Maya, thank God you're awake." I blinked several times, trying to gather my thoughts. The events of the last few hours, the shootout, the escape, the pain, came rushing back. My hand instinctively went to my chest, where I remembered the bullet wound. But it wasn't there anymore. The bleeding had stopped, and the pain was manageable now. "What happened?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. "We made it out." "Barely," Max replied, his voice tense. "After you were shot, we couldn't stay at the hotel. We had to leave the city, lay low for a while. We're in a safe house now. One of my contacts helped us get here. The others are on their way." "Others?" I tried to sit up, but my body protested, a sharp pain radiating through my chest. Max gently pushed me back down, his hands firm but kind. "We lost contact with Rachel. She's gone. But James and I—" "Rachel?" The word felt foreign coming from my lips. I had been so consumed by her betrayal that the reality of her absence was still sinking in. "She's gone?" Max nodded, his eyes dark. "She was arrested, but I don't know what happened after that. The collective, they're closing in. We don't have much time." I felt a cold wave of realization sweep over me. Rachel had been a part of the plan all along. And now that she was gone, there was nothing left to stop the collective from sweeping the truth under the rug. We had exposed their plans to the world. But if they were able to lock down the information, if they could suppress it, the world might never know the truth. We had been close, so close, but we had lost so much in the process. But then I remembered something. The broadcast. Did it go through? Did the truth get out? Max's eyes softened, and I saw the flicker of doubt in them. "It did. But—" I felt my heart skip a beat. "But what?" "The collective's reach is far. The broadcast was a spark, but they've been working quickly to extinguish it. They've already begun using the media to spin it, saying it was a hoax, a false narrative pushed by conspiracy theorists. They've planted stories to discredit the evidence. Right now, people are still waking up to what happened, but the fear they've instilled is strong. It's going to take more than just a broadcast to break the hold." I closed my eyes, taking in his words. The fight had been far from over. The battle for the truth hadn't even reached its peak. The collective had the power to control not just people's thoughts but entire narratives, entire histories. But we couldn't stop now. We had already come too far. "What's our next move?" I asked, my voice steadier now. Max took a deep breath, his eyes hardening. "We've got to regroup. We need to find allies, people who can help us amplify the broadcast, people who can stand with us. If we want to stop Project Silence, we have to get the evidence back into the hands of those who can fight back." "But how do we fight something so big?" I whispered, my mind racing with the enormity of the task ahead. "We do it the only way we know how, by keeping the truth alive. One step at a time. We expose their lies, and we keep pushing forward, no matter what." I nodded, a sense of resolve settling over me. I couldn't let everything we had sacrificed be in vain. We had come too far, and now, more than ever, the world needed to see the truth. The collective may have tried to silence us, but they wouldn't win, not while we were still breathing. Max helped me sit up, and as I did, I felt a new fire burn within me. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. We would find a way to stop the collective, to expose their plan and free the world from their grip. The road ahead would be long, and we would face countless challenges, but there was one thing I knew for sure: we weren't done yet. "Let's finish this," I said, my voice determined. Max's lips twitched into a half-smile, but there was no humor in it. "You're damn right we will." The world outside the safe house was quiet, too quiet. Despite everything we had learned, despite the lives we had risked, it still felt as though the collective influence of the system was bearing down on us, pressing in from all sides. We had exposed the truth, but now we had to make sure it didn't disappear into the shadows like so many other inconvenient facts before it. We had to take the fight to them. We had to make sure the world knew what the collective was planning before they could suppress us for good. We had a strategy, and it wasn't just about infiltrating one building or breaking into one system anymore. We were playing the long game now. The collective was too powerful for a single broadcast to topple them. But the more we dug into their operations, the more we realized the truth. There were cracks in their armor. There were people inside, just like Rachel had been, who knew how to fight back, how to expose them for who they really were. We had to find those people and bring them together. We needed to build a network of resistance that could stand up to the collective's influence. Max, James, and I were huddled around the table, now covered in maps and documents. We'd been planning for hours, sketching out our next move, trying to figure out how to break the collective's stranglehold on global information. "We need to reach the people who can spread the truth," Max said, his fingers tapping the map. "We can't just focus on one area anymore. The message has to go global. We need journalists, activists, anyone who can amplify what we've exposed." "Agreed," James said, his voice steady, though I could see the concern in his eyes. "But how do we convince people to trust us? They've been fed lies for so long. How do we make them believe in the truth again?" Max looked over at me, as if waiting for my input. I took a deep breath, then stood up, pacing the small room as the plan took shape in my mind. "We show them the proof," I said, my voice firm. "The evidence we have isn't just a story. It's a blueprint for the future. The collective's plans are in motion, and we have the map to stop them. We need to reach those who are still questioning what's going on. The people who haven't yet been completely controlled." Max nodded, as if hearing my resolve. "We need to get the evidence to independent media outlets. We reach out to underground networks, those who've been resisting the system before we even knew what it was." James pulled out his phone and began typing, likely compiling a list of contacts. "I'll start sending messages to trusted journalists who can help spread the word. But we need to get the message out more widely. The mainstream media won't touch this. They're too controlled. We need something bigger, something decentralized." I nodded. "That's why we'll need to use everything we have. We'll start a global campaign, direct actions, online movements, protests. People won't just hear about this. They'll feel it. We'll make it impossible for the collective to ignore. We expose their manipulation of information, and we fight fire with fire." Max's eyes gleamed with approval. "I like it. It's risky, but it's our best chance. We've got to move quickly before they start sweeping up anyone associated with us. If we wait too long, they'll have us all silenced." We weren't foolish. We knew this wouldn't be easy. The collective wasn't just some shadowy government entity. They had money, power, and influence in every major institution. They had the ability to crush any movement that threatened them. But they also had a weakness. People had started to wake up. The global unrest was palpable. Citizens across the world were starting to ask questions, and the cracks in the system were showing. We just had to amplify that. "We'll start by leaking the final documents," I said, "the ones that show the global scope of the collective's manipulation. We'll make sure those are on every platform we can reach." James was already moving, typing furiously on his phone. I'm sending messages to all the trusted accounts now. We'll use encrypted channels. Once the first wave hits, it'll snowball. Max and I exchanged a glance. There was no turning back now. This was our last chance to dismantle Project Silence before it became an irreversible force. But the path ahead wasn't just about information. It was about something bigger. It was about giving people a voice again. What's our next step? Max asked, his tone sharp and calculating. I looked at him, at James, then back at the maps on the table. We mobilize. We connect with the resistance, with anyone who can help us. We disrupt the signal wherever we can. We show the world that we're not afraid to fight back. And if they come for us? James asked, a grim expression on his face. If they come for us, we make sure they know we're not going down quietly, I said, my voice resolute. We don't just hide. We make them understand the world is waking up, and they can't stop it. As I spoke, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was it, the moment where we could either end the collective's reign or become victims of it. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting back. And I would fight, not just for my life, but for the freedom of everyone they had controlled. Max nodded, his eyes filled with the same fire that had fueled him for years. Let's make them pay for what they've done. And with that, we made our move. The world would soon learn the truth, and we would be the ones to deliver it, no matter the cost.